Ryan Carter thought the worst part of single fatherhood was the loneliness. He was wrong. The worst part was answering the door at midnight to find a beautiful stranger whose hand shook so badly she could barely hold the sugar bowl she'd brought as an excuse. Victoria Hale wasn't really looking for sugar. She was looking for somewhere to hide. And the man hunting her was 3 floors away, waiting. What Ryan did next would either save her life or destroy his own. If you want to see how far this story reaches, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city below. The rain had been falling for 6 hours straight when Ryan Carter finally admitted he wasn't going to sleep. It was the kind of Portland rain that didn't announce itself with thunder or dramatic downpours, just a steady, relentless tapping against the windows that worked its way into your skull and stayed there. He tried reading, he tried scrolling through his phone. He'd even tried the breathing exercises his therapist had recommended, the ones that were supposed to quiet his mind when the silence got too loud. None of it worked. At 12:12 a.m., he was standing in his kitchen in sweatpants and an old Timbers t-shirt, watching the coffee maker gurgle to life, even though he knew the caffeine would make everything worse. The apartment was small, a 1-bedroom unit in a converted warehouse building south of Burnside, but it was his. Well, his and the bank's. And on nights like this, when his 5-year-old daughter Emma was at her mother's place across town, the quiet felt less like peace and more like accusation. He was pouring his second cup when he heard the knock. Not a doorbell. A knock. Soft enough that he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. Then it came again. 3 quick taps, followed by a pause, then 2 more. The kind of knock that said, "I know it's late and I'm sorry, but please open the door." Ryan set down his mug and moved through the narrow hallway toward the front door, his bare feet silent on the hardwood. The building was generally quiet, mostly young professionals and a handful of grad students who kept odd hours. He'd lived here for 2 years and could count on one hand the number of times someone had knocked on his door after 10 p.m. He checked the peephole. The woman on the other side was maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and eyes that were trying very hard to look casual. She wore yoga pants and an oversized cardigan that she'd wrapped around herself like armor. In her hands, she held a small ceramic bowl, the kind you'd use for sugar or salt, and she was gripping it so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Ryan opened the door halfway, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late. I'm Victoria. I moved into 4B a couple weeks ago. I was baking and realized I'm completely out of sugar, and I know it's ridiculous to ask at midnight, but..." She stopped. Just stopped mid-sentence, like she'd forgotten her lines. Ryan studied her face. There was a thin sheen of sweat on her forehead despite the cool air seeping in from the hallway. Her left hand, the one not holding the bowl, was trembling. "You're not baking," he said quietly. Victoria's practiced smile crumbled. She looked down at the empty bowl in her hands like she was surprised to find it there. When she looked back up, her eyes were wet. "No," she whispered. "I'm not." Ryan felt something shift in his chest, that old instinct that had gotten him into trouble before, the one that made him step in when he should step back. He unhooked the chain and opened the door fully. "Come inside." Victoria hesitated. For a moment, Ryan thought she might actually refuse, might apologize again and disappear back into the hallway. But then she stepped across the threshold, still clutching that useless bowl, and he closed the door behind her. She didn't make it past the entryway before the words started spilling out. "He found me. I don't know how, but he did. I changed my number. I changed my email. I told my assistant to screen every call and not tell anyone where I was living, but he found me. And he's been texting me for the past 3 hours, and I know he's close because he described my car and he knew about the planter box on my balcony, and I can't breathe right, and I didn't know where else to go." She finally stopped, gasping slightly, and Ryan realized she'd said the entire thing without taking a proper breath. "Okay," he said, keeping his voice level. "First thing, are you in immediate danger right now? Is he in the building?" "I don't know. Maybe. He said he was nearby. He said we needed to talk face to face, that I was being unreasonable, that he just wanted to explain things properly." "When did he send the last message?" Victoria pulled her phone from her cardigan pocket with shaking hands. The screen was cracked in one corner, and when she turned it toward him, Ryan saw a wall of notifications, texts, missed calls, voicemails. all from a contact labeled simply "Do Not Answer." The most recent text had come in 17 minutes ago. "I can see your light on. Third floor, corner unit. You got the balcony you always wanted? That's good. You deserve nice things, Vic. Just come down and talk to me for 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Ryan felt ice settle in his stomach. "What's your apartment number again?" "4B, fourth floor." "Your light's on right now?" She nodded. "And you have a balcony?" Another nod. Ryan moved to his own window and carefully pulled back the curtain, looking down at the street below. The rain made it hard to see clearly, but there were a few cars parked along the curb, headlights off. One of them, a dark sedan about half a block down, had someone sitting in the driver's seat. He could see the faint glow of a phone screen. "Is he dangerous?" Ryan asked, still watching the street. Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Define dangerous. He never hit me, if that's what you're asking. But he followed me to work. He hacked into my email. He convinced my little sister that I was having a mental breakdown and needed intervention. He ruined a business deal by calling my partners and telling them I was unstable. Does that count?" Ryan let the curtain fall closed and turned to face her. Victoria was still standing in his entryway, holding that bowl, looking like she might shatter if he said the wrong thing. "Yeah," he said. "That counts." He moved into the kitchen and grabbed his phone from the counter. "I'm calling the police." "No." Victoria's voice was sharp. "Please don't." Ryan paused, finger hovering over the screen. "Why not?" "Because I tried that before. In Seattle, before I moved, I filed reports, I showed them the messages, and they said unless he makes a specific threat or shows up at my door, there's nothing they can do. And then when they talked to him, he was so calm and reasonable. He told them we'd had a bad breakup and I was having trouble letting go. He showed them texts I'd sent, ones he manipulated me into sending, and suddenly I'm the unstable one. The crazy ex-girlfriend who can't move on." Her voice cracked on the last word. Ryan set his phone down. He'd read articles about this kind of thing, listened to podcasts while washing dishes after Emma went to bed. He knew the statistics about restraining orders that didn't get enforced, about police who didn't take emotional abuse seriously, about women who ended up dead because nobody believed them until it was too late. "Okay," he said. "No police right now. But you can't go back upstairs tonight." Victoria finally set down the bowl, placing it carefully on the narrow table by his door. "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. You can take my bedroom. I'll sleep on the couch." "I don't even know you." Ryan almost smiled at that. "Yeah, well, you picked the right door to knock on. I'm pathologically incapable of minding my own business. My ex-wife will confirm." That got a small, surprised laugh out of Victoria. It sounded rusty, like she hadn't used it in a while. "I'm Ryan, by the way," he said, extending his hand. "Ryan Carter. I work in tech support for a healthcare company. I have a 5-year-old daughter who stays with me 3 nights a week, and I make pretty decent coffee if you need some." Victoria shook his hand. Her grip was stronger than he expected. "Victoria Hale, CEO of a small consulting firm that helps nonprofits with their digital infrastructure. No kids, no pets, and I would kill for some coffee right now." "CEO, huh?" Ryan moved back to the kitchen and grabbed a second mug. "Seems like you'd have better resources for dealing with this kind of thing than knocking on a stranger's door at midnight." "You'd think that." Victoria followed him, her shoulders still hunched like she was bracing for impact. But money and professional success don't mean much when someone knows exactly which buttons to push. "Marcus," that's his name, Marcus Chen. "He was my COO for 3 years before we started dating. He knows how I think, he knows my weaknesses, and he's very, very good at making me doubt myself." Ryan poured coffee into both mugs, black, then slid one across the counter to her. Victoria wrapped both hands around it like she was trying to absorb its heat. "How long were you together?" he asked. 18 months. Longest 1.5 years of my life." She took a sip, winced at the heat, took another. "The first 6 months were perfect. He was attentive and supportive, and he seemed to genuinely care about the company. Then things started shifting. Small things at first. He'd get upset if I had lunch with a male colleague without telling him first. He wanted access to my calendar so he could help me optimize my time. He started reviewing my emails to protect me from making strategic mistakes. Control masked as concern, Ryan said. Victoria looked up sharply. "You've dealt with this before?" "My sister dated a guy like that in college. Took her 2 years to get out. Took her 4 more years to stop looking over her shoulder. Ryan leaned against the counter. She's okay now. Married to a woman who treats her like gold, but it was bad for a while. Something in Victoria's posture relaxed slightly. Not much, but enough that Ryan could see her breathing deepen. When did you leave him? He asked. 7 months ago. I finally had enough after he showed up at my apartment uninvited and let himself in with a key I didn't know he'd made. I found him sitting in my living room, reorganizing my bookshelves because he said the way I'd had them arranged was chaotic and reflected poorly on my mental state. I told him to get out. He refused. Said we needed to talk about my recent concerning behavior. I had to call my assistant and threatened to call the police before he finally left. Jesus. I fired him the next day. Paid out his contract, gave him 6 months severance, made it very clear that our professional and personal relationships were over. He sent me 93 emails in the following week. I blocked him. He created new accounts. I blocked those. He started calling my clients, my board members, my mother, telling everyone I was having a breakdown, that I was making irrational decisions, that I needed help. Victoria's hands were shaking again, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of the mug. Ryan gently took it from her and set it on the counter. Some people believed him, she continued, her voice hollow. My little sister definitely did. She staged an intervention with my mom, tried to convince me to take a leave of absence and get help. It took me 3 months to repair the damage to my professional relationships. And even now, there are people who look at me differently, like they're waiting for me to crack. That's why you moved to Portland. Fresh start, new city, new clients, new everything. I didn't tell anyone except my assistant where I was going. I thought I'd finally gotten away. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Guess not. Ryan glanced at his phone. 12:47 a.m. The text from Marcus was now 30 minutes old. If he was still outside, he was patient. Do you have family here? Ryan asked. Friends you can call? Victoria shook her head. I've only been here 3 weeks. I've been so focused on getting the business relocated that I haven't exactly made time for socializing. My mom's in San Francisco, my sister's in Denver, and neither of them would believe me anyway. They think I'm paranoid. What about your board? Your assistant? My assistant is in Seattle working remote until we fully transition the office. My board knows I relocated, but they don't know why. I told them I wanted to be closer to Portland's nonprofit community. She met his eyes. I'm good at my job, Ryan. Really good. But if they knew the real reason I left Seattle, if they knew I was being stalked by my ex-COO, it would confirm every doubt Marcus planted. I'd lose their confidence. Ryan understood the bind she was in. Professional success, built on a foundation of perceived stability, threatened by the very real chaos of being hunted by someone who knew exactly how to undermine her. Okay, he said, here's what we're going to do. You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we figure out next steps. We document everything, screenshots of those messages, timeline of his behavior, anything that establishes a pattern, and we find you a lawyer who specializes in this stuff, someone who can help you get an enforceable restraining order. I can't afford to... Yes, you can. You're a CEO, remember? And even if you couldn't, this isn't about money. This is about safety. Ryan softened his tone. Look, I get it. You're used to handling things yourself. You've built a company, you've navigated a male-dominated industry, you've probably fought for every inch of respect you've earned. But you don't have to do this alone. Victoria's eyes were shining again, but she blinked the tears back. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I could be the crazy one. Marcus could be right. Ryan thought about that for a moment. Then he said, my daughter Emma has this book about a kid who finds an injured bird. Everyone tells the kid to leave it alone, that it's nature's way, that getting involved will just make things worse. But the kid brings the bird inside anyway, builds it a little nest, feeds it with an eyedropper. And the bird heals. The last page shows it flying away, and the kid is smiling even though the bird is gone, because helping was the right thing to do regardless of the outcome. That's a children's book. Yeah, well, children's books are usually right about the important stuff. Ryan straightened. You're not crazy, Victoria. Scared, maybe. Exhausted, definitely. But not crazy. And I'd rather help someone who doesn't need it than turn away someone who does. Victoria wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Emma's lucky to have you. Tell that to her mother, Ryan said, aiming for lightness and not quite hitting it. Come on, Let me show you where the bedroom is. He led her down the short hallway. His apartment was modest, one bedroom, one bathroom, an open living area that combined kitchen and living room. The bedroom was small, dominated by a queen bed with rumpled sheets he hadn't bothered to make that morning. His laptop sat on the dresser, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee mugs. "Sorry about the mess," he said, quickly gathering up the mugs. "I wasn't expecting company." "It's fine. It's more than fine." Victoria stood in the doorway, taking it in. "I feel like I should explain more about why I came to you instead of calling someone I actually know." Ryan set the mugs on the dresser. "You don't owe me an explanation." "I know, but I want to give you one anyway." She took a breath. "When I first moved in, I saw you in the lobby with your daughter. She'd dropped her stuffed rabbit, and you spent 5 minutes retracing your steps to find it, even though she'd stopped crying and was distracted by something else. You could have just promised to get her a new one, but you didn't. You kept looking until you found it. And when you gave it back to her, she hugged you and said, 'Daddy's the best finder.'" I was having a terrible day. Marcus had just found my new phone number somehow and left me a voicemail about how disappointed he was in my childish behavior. And watching you with Emma was the first thing that made me smile in weeks. Ryan felt something catch in his throat. "She loves that rabbit, had it since she was born." "I know, I could tell." Victoria's smile was sad. "When I saw Marcus's text tonight and realized he'd found me again, I panicked. But then I remembered you, the guy who spent 5 minutes looking for a stuffed rabbit because it mattered to his kid. And I thought, if I'm going to trust someone, it should be him." They stood there for a moment, the rain still tapping against the window, the weight of the night pressing down on both of them. "Get some sleep," Ryan finally said. "Or try to, at least. I'll be on the couch if you need anything." "Thank you." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "I mean it. Thank you." Ryan nodded and stepped out, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. He grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and made his way back to the living room, trying to ignore the way his mind was already racing ahead, cataloging problems and potential solutions. He should sleep. He had a meeting at 9 a.m., and showing up exhausted and distracted wouldn't help anyone. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw that text message. "I can see your light on." At 1:30 a.m., unable to settle, Ryan got up and checked the street again. The dark sedan was still there, but the interior light was off now. Either Marcus had given up for the night, or he was waiting for something. Ryan pulled out his phone and did what he probably should have done an hour ago. He started researching stalking laws in Oregon, restraining order requirements, precedents for cases involving emotional abuse and harassment. He made notes, created a timeline based on what Victoria had told him, started building the foundation of a case that couldn't be easily dismissed. He was deep into reading about the state's anti-stalking statute when he heard the bedroom door open. Victoria appeared in the hallway, still wearing her cardigan, her hair down now around her shoulders. "Can't sleep either?" Ryan asked. She shook her head and moved to the couch, sitting on the opposite end with her legs tucked under her. "Every time I close my eyes, I think I hear him knocking on the door." Ryan turned his phone screen toward her, showing her the legal document he'd been reading. "Did you know Oregon has a specific statute for cyber stalking? It covers electronic communication that causes substantial emotional distress. Those 93 emails Marcus sent you, that alone could be enough for a restraining order." Victoria leaned forward, squinting at the small text. "I tried to get one in Seattle. They said I needed to prove imminent physical danger. Different state, different standards. Oregon's more aggressive about this stuff." Ryan scrolled down. "There's a victim assistance program through the state that can help with legal fees. And Portland has a nonprofit that specializes in helping women navigate the legal system in stalking cases." "You researched all this in the last hour?" "I work in tech support. Research is literally my job." He set the phone down. "Look, I'm not a lawyer, but I know how to find information, and I know how to build a case. If you want help putting this together, I'm offering." Victoria pulled the cardigan tighter around herself. "Why do you care this much? I'm a stranger who knocked on your door with a fake story about needing sugar." Ryan thought about how to answer that. He could talk about his sister, about how helpless he'd felt watching her struggle. He could talk about Emma, about the kind of world he wanted her to grow up in. He could talk about his ex-wife, about how their marriage had fallen apart, partly because he'd never learned when to let things go, when to stop trying to fix things that weren't his to fix. Instead, he said, Because it's 1:30 in the morning and we're both awake and miserable, and if I'm going to be awake and miserable anyway, I might as well be useful. That surprised a real laugh out of Victoria, short and startled, but genuine. That's the most honest answer anyone's given me in months. I'm too tired to be anything but honest. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain. Eventually, Victoria spoke again, her voice quiet. He wasn't always like this, you know. Marcus, when we first met, he was brilliant, funny. He challenged me intellectually in ways no one else did. I thought I'd finally found someone who saw me as an equal, someone who didn't feel threatened by my success. What changed? I don't know. Maybe nothing changed. Maybe he was always like this and I just didn't see it because I was too caught up in the idea of what we could be together. She picked at a loose thread on the blanket. Or maybe I did see it, and I ignored it because acknowledging it would mean admitting I'd made a mistake. And I don't like being wrong. Ryan smiled at that. Yeah, I picked up on the control freak thing. I prefer detail-oriented perfectionist. Sure, that's definitely what people say behind your back at board meetings. Another small laugh. Victoria's shoulders had relaxed incrementally, her breathing steadier than it had been when she first arrived. Can I ask you something? She said after a pause. Go ahead. Your ex-wife. You mentioned her earlier. What happened there? Ryan considered deflecting, giving her some sanitized version that wouldn't make him look bad. But she'd been honest with him, painfully so. He owed her the same. I smothered her, he said simply. Not intentionally, but effectively. She had postpartum depression after Emma was born, and instead of getting her proper help, I tried to fix it myself. Took over everything, night feedings, diaper changes, all of it. Told myself I was being supportive, that I was stepping up. Really, I was making her feel incompetent and unnecessary. That doesn't sound like smothering, that sounds like helping. There's a difference between helping and taking over, between supporting someone and making all their decisions for them because you're convinced you know better. Ryan rubbed his face. By the time Emma was 6 months old, Jenna felt like a guest in her own life. She told me she needed space, needed to feel like a parent instead of just another problem for me to solve. I didn't listen. Said I was just trying to help, that she was being ungrateful. We split when Emma was 2. Do you still love her? The question caught Ryan off guard. He had to think about it. No, he said finally. I mean, I care about her. We're good co-parents now, better than we were when we were married, but I think what I loved was the idea of being the person who saved her, the hero. Turns out real relationships don't work like that. Victoria nodded slowly. Marcus used to say he was saving me from myself, that I was so focused on work that I'd forgotten how to be a person, and he was helping me find balance. I believed him for a long time. But you eventually figured out he was full of shit. Eventually. She pulled her knees up to her chest. The hardest part is that some of what he said was true. I do work too much. I do have trouble letting people in. I can be controlling and rigid and impossible to please. Those are real flaws. But he weaponized them, used my self-awareness against me. That's the thing about emotional abuse, Ryan said. It works best when there's a kernel of truth to build the lie around. They talked until almost 3 a.m., the conversation meandering through topics both heavy and light. Victoria told him about growing up in the Bay Area with a mother who'd built her own business and a father who'd left when she was 12. Ryan told her about his mediocre college career, his accidental stumble into tech support, the way becoming a father had rewired his entire understanding of what mattered. At some point, exhaustion finally caught up with both of them. Victoria's words started slurring together, her eyes heavy. Ryan realized he'd stopped making sense several sentences back. We should sleep, he said, stifling a yawn. Victoria nodded but didn't move from the couch. Can I ask one more thing? Yeah. If Marcus shows up tomorrow, if he actually tries to get into the building, what are you going to do? Ryan thought about that. He wasn't a fighter. He'd never thrown a punch outside of the one time in 8th grade when Tommy Morrison had called his sister a slut, and that had ended with Ryan getting a black eye and 2 weeks of detention. He was good with computers and patient with difficult customers, and excellent at explaining technical concepts to non-technical people. None of that would matter if Marcus decided to force his way past the building's laughably inadequate security door. I don't know, he admitted, but I won't let him get to you. That's a promise. Victoria studied his face for a long moment. Then she stood, swaying slightly with fatigue. I believe you, she said, which is either very smart or very stupid of me. Probably both. She smiled at that, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes despite the fear still lurking there. Then she went back to the bedroom, and Ryan heard the door click shut. He stretched out on the couch, pulled the blanket over himself, and stared at the ceiling. The rain had finally started to let up, the steady drumming fading to sporadic drops. Somewhere in the building, a pipe creaked. A car passed on the street below, its headlights briefly illuminating the room before disappearing. Ryan thought about Marcus, sitting in his car, waiting. He thought about Victoria, alone in his bedroom, probably not sleeping despite her exhaustion. He thought about Emma, safe at her mother's house, blissfully unaware that her father had just involved himself in something that could go very wrong in a lot of different ways. His phone buzzed. For a moment, panic spiked. Had Marcus somehow gotten his number? But it was just a calendar notification. Meeting at 9 a.m. Presentation on the new ticketing system. He should be preparing for it, making sure his slides were updated, rehearsing his talking points. Instead, he was here, lying on his couch, acting as a human shield for a woman he'd met 3 hours ago. Jenna would say he was doing it again, getting involved in things that weren't his problem, trying to save people who hadn't asked to be saved. His therapist would probably agree, would remind him about boundaries and the importance of not taking on other people's crises as a way of avoiding his own. But as Ryan finally felt himself starting to drift off, he realized something. He didn't care. And maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was his savior complex kicking in again. Maybe he'd wake up tomorrow and regret every decision he'd made tonight. But right now, with Victoria safe in the next room and Marcus still outside in his car, Ryan felt more useful than he had in months. That had to count for something. He was almost asleep when he heard it. A soft sound from the bedroom. Not crying, exactly. More like the kind of careful breathing you do when you're trying very hard not to cry. Ryan considered getting up, checking on her, offering comfort. He stayed where he was. Some things people had to work through on their own. And sometimes the kindest thing you could do was just be nearby, ready to help if asked, but not forcing your way in uninvited. Ryan closed his eyes and let exhaustion pull him under. The sound of Victoria's careful breathing and the last few drops of rain creating a strange lullaby that finally, mercifully, let him sleep. The last thought he had before unconsciousness claimed him was a simple one. Tomorrow was going to be complicated. He had no idea just how right he was. Ryan woke to sunlight cutting through the gaps in his blinds and the immediate certainty that he'd overslept. His phone said 8:47 a.m. The meeting was in 13 minutes, and he was still on his couch in yesterday's clothes, his neck kinked at an angle that promised a headache for the rest of the day. He sat up too fast, and the room tilted. Coffee. He needed coffee and a shower and about 4 more hours of sleep, in that order. But first he needed to check on Victoria. The bedroom door was open, the bed was made, badly, but made, and Victoria was nowhere to be seen. For one disorienting moment, Ryan wondered if he'd dreamed the whole thing. Then he heard water running in the kitchen. He found her standing at his counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She'd changed clothes, a blouse and slacks that must have come from her apartment upstairs, and pulled her hair back into a tight bun. The transformation from last night's terrified woman to this composed professional was jarring. "You're awake," she said, sliding one of the mugs toward him. "I wasn't sure if I should wake you. You look dead to the world." "What time did you get up?" 6. "I couldn't sleep anymore, so I went upstairs to grab some clothes and my laptop. I was only up there for maybe 10 minutes. Ryan's hand froze halfway to the coffee mug. "You went back up there alone?" "The building was quiet. I checked the hallway first, and I was quick." She saw his expression and added, I know, stupid, but I needed my work stuff, and I didn't want to wake you." "Victoria, I'm fine. Nothing happened. Marcus's car was gone when I looked out my window." Ryan took a long drink of coffee, using the moment to wrestle down the spike of anxiety that had shot through him. She was an adult. She could make her own decisions. He had no right to lecture her about safety when he'd known her for less than 12 hours. But he wanted to. "I have a meeting in 12 minutes, he said instead, checking his phone again. "Well, 11 now. It's virtual, so I can take it from here, but I need to look slightly less like I slept on a couch. Go shower. I'll hold down the fort." Ryan hesitated, then grabbed his phone and headed for the bathroom. He took the fastest shower of his life, threw on the cleanest clothes he could find in under a minute, and made it back to his laptop with 90 seconds to spare. Victoria had retreated to the far end of the couch, her own laptop open, headphones in. The meeting was exactly as tedious as he'd expected. His boss droned on about the new ticketing system, and Ryan nodded at appropriate intervals while his mind wandered. He kept thinking about that text from Marcus. I can see your light on, the level of surveillance that implied, the patience it required to sit in a car in the rain, watching windows. When the meeting finally ended at 9:52, Ryan closed his laptop and found Victoria watching him. You look like you wanted to throw your computer across the room, she said, pulling out her headphones. Standard Wednesday morning meeting, death by PowerPoint. He stretched, feeling his spine crack. What about you? You working? Trying to. I have a client call at 11 that I can't reschedule, and I need to review some budget projections first. She paused. Is it okay if I stay here a while longer? I can go to a coffee shop if you need your space back. Stay as long as you want. I'm working from home today anyway. Ryan moved to the kitchen and started pulling things out of the refrigerator. Have you eaten? I'm not hungry. That wasn't the question, Victoria sighed. No, I haven't eaten. Ryan set about making scrambled eggs and toast, working with the efficient movements of someone who'd done this exact routine 1,000 times. When Emma was with him, mornings were a carefully choreographed dance of breakfast and getting dressed and finding lost shoes. Without her, the space felt too quiet, the rituals hollow. He set a plate in front of Victoria. She looked at it like it might bite her. I really don't eat, Ryan said, not unkindly. You were shaking last night. Low blood sugar makes anxiety worse. She picked up her fork, took a small bite, then another. Ryan watched her shoulders drop slightly as the food hit her system. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Victoria said, I've been thinking about what you said last night, about documenting everything. Yeah. I went through my emails this morning. I have over 300 messages from Marcus across various accounts, and that's just since I fired him. Before that, there are probably thousands of work emails that blur the line between professional and personal. Ryan set down his coffee. 300? 347 to be exact. Some of them are one-liners, we need to talk or please call me, but others are pages long. Manifestos about how I've changed, how I'm not the woman he fell in love with, how he's worried about me making poor decisions without his guidance. Did you respond to any of them? Victoria's face tightened. A few. Early on, before I understood what he was doing, I'd try to be firm but professional, explaining that we were done and he needed to respect that. He'd twist my words, take screenshots of the responses out of context, and use them as evidence that I was still engaging with him, that I wanted the contact. Classic Darvo, Ryan said. What? Deny, attack, reverse. Victim and offender. It's a tactic abusers use. He does something wrong, you call him out, and suddenly he's the victim of your aggression and you're the abuser. Ryan pushed his plate aside. My sister's ex was an expert at it. He'd scream at her for hours, she'd finally yell back, and then he'd record her yelling and play it for their friends as proof that she was the unstable one. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small. How did your sister get out? She had a friend who'd been through something similar. The friend sat her down one day and said, I know you think you're going crazy. You're not. He's making you feel that way on purpose. Something about hearing it from someone who understood. It clicked. She left him 2 weeks later. Was he angry? Furious. He showed up at her dorm, at her classes, at her job. Campus security finally got involved when he tried to force his way into her apartment. They banned him from campus, and that was enough to break the pattern. He moved on to someone else within a month. Victoria absorbed that. Marcus won't move on. He's too invested in the narrative that I'm the one who needs to come to my senses. Then we changed the narrative. Ryan stood and grabbed his laptop. Show me the emails. We're going to build a timeline that's so detailed and well-documented that no one can dismiss it. They spent the next hour going through Victoria's digital paper trail. Ryan created a spreadsheet, logging each message with timestamps, subject lines, and brief summaries of content. He marked the ones that contained explicit threats, the ones that referenced her location or daily activities, the ones that veered into sexual territory without her consent. Victoria grew quieter as they worked, her responses becoming more clipped. Ryan recognized the signs of someone dissociating from trauma, separating herself from the reality of what she was reading. "We can stop," he said after she'd gone silent for several minutes. "No. We need to finish this." "Victoria." I said no. Her voice had an edge to it now. "If I stop, if I let myself actually feel what I'm reading, I won't be able to get through my 11 o'clock call, and I can't afford to fall apart right now." Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that falling apart was sometimes the only way to put yourself back together properly, but he recognized the stubborn set of her jaw. He'd seen the same expression in his bathroom mirror plenty of times. They kept working. By 10:30, they had a comprehensive document, 347 emails, organized by date and severity, with a separate tab tracking voicemails, text messages, and documented instances of Marcus contacting her colleagues and family members. The spreadsheet alone was 14 pages when Ryan printed it out. "This is good," he said, reviewing the final product. "Really good. Any lawyer worth their fee will look at this and immediately see the pattern." Victoria was staring at her laptop screen, at an email Marcus had sent 6 weeks ago. Ryan glanced at it and felt his stomach turn. It was a rambling 5,000-word screed about how Victoria's decision to move to Portland was evidence of her declining mental health, peppered with phrases like concern for your well-being and duty to intervene. "He sent that to my mother," Victoria said quietly. "She called me crying, asking what was wrong, why I hadn't told her I was struggling. It took me 2 hours to convince her that Marcus was lying, that I was fine. I don't think she fully believed me even then." "That's not your fault, isn't it? I'm the one who dated him. I'm the one who promoted him to COO, who gave him access to my entire life. I'm the one who ignored every red flag because I was too proud to admit I'd made a mistake." Ryan recognized this too. The self-blame that came with surviving someone else's abuse. His sister had done the same thing, turned the anger inward because it felt safer than directing it at the person who actually deserved it. "You didn't make him do this," Ryan said. "He chose to behave this way. That's on him, not you." Easy to say. Doesn't make it less true. Victoria closed her laptop with more force than necessary. "I need to prep for my call." She retreated to the bedroom and Ryan gave her space. He tidied up the breakfast dishes, answered a few work emails, and tried not to think about how quickly he'd become invested in a situation that, rationally, wasn't his problem. At 10:55, his phone rang. Unknown number. Ryan almost didn't answer, then thought better of it. "Hello? Is this Ryan Carter?" The voice was smooth, professional, male. "Who's asking?" "My name is Marcus Chen. I believe you're currently harboring my girlfriend." Ryan's entire body went cold. He looked toward the closed bedroom door, then walked to his front window, keeping his voice low. "Victoria's not your girlfriend. I see she's gotten to you already. Let me guess. She told you I'm dangerous? That I'm stalking her? That she's afraid for her life?" Marcus laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that sounded practiced. "She's very good at playing the victim. It's one of her survival mechanisms." "How did you get my number?" "The building directory. You'd be surprised what information is publicly available if you know where to look." A pause. "I'm not trying to cause trouble, Ryan. I'm just worried about Victoria. She's not well. The stress of the business, the move, cutting off everyone who cares about her, it's taking a toll. I'm sure you can see that." Ryan gripped the phone tighter. "What I see is someone who won't take no for an answer. Did she tell you why we broke up? Did she mention that she fired me without cause? That she cut me out of a company I helped build? I gave 3 years of my life to that business, and she discarded me like I was nothing. You were her employee. She had every right to fire you. We were partners, in every sense of the word. And yes, our romantic relationship ended badly. These things happen. But that doesn't erase everything we built together. I've been trying to have a civil conversation with her for 7 months, and she won't even give me 5 minutes. That's not rational behavior, Ryan. That's someone who's running from reality." The scary thing was how reasonable Marcus sounded. His tone was calm, almost gentle. If Ryan hadn't seen Victoria's terror last night, hadn't read those hundreds of emails, he might have actually believed him. "Stop contacting her," Ryan said. "Stop emailing, stop texting, stop sitting outside her building in your car. Leave her alone." There was a long silence. When Marcus spoke again, the warmth had drained from his voice. You've known her for what, 12 hours? And you think you understand the situation better than I do? I've known Victoria for 4 years. I know how she thinks. I know her patterns. And I know she's very good at making people feel protective of her, especially men who have their own hero complexes to work out. Ryan felt the dig land but refused to react. This conversation is over. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're aiding someone who's in clear psychological distress. If something happens to her, if she hurts herself or makes another reckless decision, you're going to have to live with the fact that you enabled it. Goodbye, Marcus. Tell Victoria I just want to talk. That's all. 5 minutes of her time, and then I'll leave her alone. Surely that's not too much to ask after everything we... Ryan hung up. His hands were shaking. He stood there for a moment, staring at his phone, replaying the conversation in his head. Marcus was good. Really good. He'd managed to sound concerned and reasonable while simultaneously implying that Ryan was irresponsible and Victoria was unstable. If Ryan had been on the fence about any of this, that call might have tipped him. The bedroom door opened. Victoria emerged, looking composed in that brittle way that suggested she was one wrong word from shattering. How'd the call go? Ryan asked, keeping his voice neutral. Fine. Client wants to expand the project scope, which means more work but also more revenue. She glanced at him. You okay? You look weird. Ryan debated lying, decided against it. Marcus called me. All the color drained from Victoria's face. What? He got my number from the building directory. Called about 5 minutes ago, tried to convince me you're having a mental breakdown, and I'm making things worse by helping you. Victoria sank onto the couch, her professional composure crumbling. What did you say? I told him to leave you alone and hung up. Ryan sat down next to her, careful to leave space between them. He's very convincing. I can see how he's gotten people to doubt you. He used to be a debate champion in college. He knows how to argue, how to make you question your own perceptions. Victoria's voice was hollow. What else did he say? Ryan told her, watching her face close down with each detail. When he finished, she was staring at the floor, her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles had gone white. He's not going to stop, she said. He never stops. He'll keep calling you, keep finding new ways to insert himself into my life until I either break down or give in. Then we go to the police today. I told you they won't. We have documentation now. Emails, texts, a recorded pattern of behavior spanning months. And now he started contacting people in your life, trying to manipulate them. That's harassment, Victoria. That's stalking. Oregon law doesn't require a physical threat to file for a restraining order. Victoria looked up at him, and Ryan saw the war happening behind her eyes, the part that wanted to believe him fighting against the part that had been beaten down by 7 months of gaslighting and institutional indifference. What if they don't believe me? She said quietly. What if I go in there with all our evidence and they look at me the same way the Seattle police did? Then we find a lawyer and we file for the restraining order ourselves. But we have to try. Ryan leaned forward. You can't keep living like this, running, hiding, waiting for him to show up at your door. At some point, you have to stand still and fight back. I don't know how to fight back. I know how to work. I know how to build businesses and manage clients and navigate board politics. But this? She gestured vaguely at the space between them. I don't know how to do this. You don't have to do it alone. That's the whole point. They sat there in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Finally, Victoria took a shaky breath. Okay, she said, let's go to the police. The Portland Police Bureau's East Precinct was a squat, utilitarian building on Southeast 106th Avenue that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd given up on aesthetics around 1987. Ryan and Victoria sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs in the lobby, waiting for someone to take their statement. Ryan had called ahead, been transferred 3 times, and finally been told to come in and ask for the victim services coordinator. That had been 40 minutes ago. Now they were waiting while a desk sergeant processed a steady stream of people with problems that all seemed more urgent than theirs. Victoria sat rigid beside him, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. She'd barely spoken during the drive over, had just nodded when Ryan suggested they bring printed copies of the documentation they'd compiled. You okay? Ryan asked quietly. No, she said. But I'm here. Finally, a woman in her mid-50s with gray hair and kind eyes appeared in the lobby doorway. Victoria Hale? They stood, The woman introduced herself as Officer Patricia Reeves and led them to a small conference room with a table, 4 chairs, and a poster about domestic violence resources that was peeling away from the wall in one corner. "So," Reeves said, settling into her chair and pulling out a notepad. "Tell me what's going on." Victoria started talking, and Ryan watched her transform. The uncertainty from the lobby vanished, replaced by the crisp, professional tone he imagined she used in board meetings. She laid out the facts chronologically, without emotional embellishment, referencing the documentation she'd brought with the precision of someone presenting a business case. Reeves took notes, asked clarifying questions, and didn't interrupt. When Victoria finished, Reeves set down her pen. "This is clearly a pattern of harassment," she said. "And the fact that he's now contacting people in your support system, that's escalation. I'm going to be straight with you, though. Getting a restraining order isn't automatic, and it's not always effective." "What does that mean?" Ryan asked. Reeves looked at him for the first time since they'd started. "Are you family? Legal representation?" "I'm a friend." "Recent friend," Victoria added, "but he's been helping me document everything." Reeves nodded slowly. "Okay, here's the situation. You can petition for a restraining order. In Oregon, we call it a stalking protective order. If a judge grants it, Marcus Chen will be legally prohibited from contacting you, coming within a certain distance of you, or engaging in behavior that constitutes stalking. If he violates it, he can be arrested." "That sounds good," Victoria said. "In theory, in practice, restraining orders are only as good as the person's willingness to follow them. Some people see it as a serious legal consequence and back off. Others see it as a challenge." Reeves leaned forward. "I've worked domestic violence and stalking cases for 15 years. I've seen restraining orders save lives, and I've seen them escalate situations. The question you need to ask yourself is, how do you think Marcus will react?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. A year ago, I would have said he'd be furious, but ultimately respect the law. Now, I genuinely don't know what he's capable of." "Has he ever been physically violent with you?" "No." "Threatened physical violence?" "Not explicitly, but there have been moments during arguments where I felt unsafe, like he was barely keeping himself under control." Reeves made a note. "I'm going to recommend you file for the protective order. I'll also recommend you vary your routine. Be aware of your surroundings, and consider whether your current living situation is secure." "What does that mean?" Victoria asked. "It means if Marcus knows where you live, you might want to consider staying somewhere else for a while. With family, friends, a hotel, somewhere he won't think to look." Victoria glanced at Ryan. He could see the panic starting to creep back into her eyes. "She can stay with me," Ryan heard himself say. "For as long as she needs." Reeves looked between them, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Carter, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" She stood and gestured for Ryan to follow her into the hallway. Once the door was closed, she turned to him with the kind of look his mother used to give him when he'd done something well-intentioned but stupid. "How long have you known Ms. Hale?" she asked. "Since last night." "And you're offering to let her stay in your home indefinitely?" "Yes," Reeves sighed. "I appreciate the impulse to help." "I do. But you need to understand what you're signing up for. Stalking cases can drag on for months, sometimes years. Protective orders need to be renewed, violators need to be prosecuted, and the target, Ms. Hale, is going to be dealing with significant psychological trauma throughout. You're essentially offering to become a part of that, to make yourself a player in Marcus Chen's obsession." "I understand. Do you? Because he's already contacted you once. If you become Victoria's primary support system, he'll see you as an obstacle. He might escalate toward you. He might try to dig into your life, find vulnerabilities, use them against both of you. You have a daughter, Mr. Carter. Are you prepared for the possibility that Marcus might try to use her as leverage?" Ryan felt ice in his veins. He hadn't thought about that, hadn't considered that helping Victoria might put Emma at risk. Reeves must have seen something in his face because her expression softened. "I'm not trying to scare you off. What you're doing, helping a neighbor in danger, is commendable. But you need to go into this with your eyes open. This isn't a short-term problem with a simple solution." "What should I do?" Ryan asked. "That's up to you. But if you're going to help her, do it smart. Keep documentation of every contact Marcus makes with you. Install security cameras if you don't have them. Make sure your daughter's school knows not to release her to anyone but you and her mother. And be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better. They went back into the conference room. Victoria was sitting exactly where they'd left her, looking small in a way that made Ryan's chest ache. Reeves helped them fill out the paperwork for the stalking protective order, explained the timeline. A hearing would be scheduled within 30 days, and Marcus would be served with the petition, and gave Victoria a folder full of resources: domestic violence hotlines, counseling services, legal aid organizations. When they finally left the precinct an hour later, Victoria looked exhausted. "Thank you," she said as they walked to Ryan's car, "for coming with me. For all of it. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning." They drove back to Ryan's apartment in silence. The afternoon had turned gray, typical Portland weather settling in like a mood. When they pulled into the parking lot, Ryan found himself checking the street for Marcus's sedan, scanning faces of people on the sidewalk. Victoria noticed. "He's gotten into your head too now." "Yeah," Ryan admitted, but that's okay, better paranoid than unprepared. Inside the apartment, Victoria collapsed onto the couch like a puppet with cut strings. Ryan made coffee out of habit, even though it was nearly 3 p.m., and neither of them needed more caffeine. His phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. "Emma wants to know if she can bring her new dinosaur book to your place this weekend. It's huge, and she insists on reading it every night." Ryan smiled despite everything. "Tell her yes, and tell her I'll make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs if she wants." The response came quickly. "You're setting impossible standards for the rest of us parents, you know. That's the plan." He looked up to find Victoria watching him, something unreadable in her expression. "Your daughter?" she asked. "Yeah, she's coming over this weekend." "I should find somewhere else to stay. You can't have me here when your daughter visits." "Why not?" Victoria gestured vaguely at herself, at the situation. "Because I'm a mess. Because this is complicated. Because it's not appropriate." Emma's 5. Her definition of appropriate is whether you put ketchup on scrambled eggs. Which I do, and which her mother thinks is barbaric, but that's beside the point. Ryan sat down across from her. "Look, you don't have to stay here long term, but until the restraining order hearing, until we know how Marcus is going to react, I'd feel better if you weren't alone in that apartment upstairs." "Ryan, no conditions, no expectations. You take the bedroom, I'll take the couch. You work your schedule, I'll work mine. The only rule is you don't go anywhere alone at night, and you tell me if Marcus contacts you again." Victoria's eyes were wet. "Why are you doing this?" It was the same question she'd asked last night, and Ryan still didn't have a better answer than the truth. "Because someone helped my sister when she needed it. Because I have a daughter who I hope will grow up in a world where people help each other instead of looking away. Because it's the right thing to do, and I'm tired of overthinking the right thing until it becomes the wrong thing." He paused. "And because you knocked on my door, Victoria. You could have knocked on 2B or 3A or called a hotel or driven to Seattle to stay with friends. But you knocked on my door. That has to mean something." She wiped at her eyes. "You're kind of intense, you know that?" "My ex-wife would agree with you." "She's an idiot for letting you go." "She'd also agree with that, actually. We're very civil." That got a small laugh out of Victoria, watery but genuine. She took a shaky breath, composing herself. "Okay," she said. "I'll stay, but I'm paying you rent." "Absolutely not. Ryan, this isn't a negotiation. You're a guest, not a tenant." "Then I'm buying all the groceries." "Fine, but I'm still cooking." "Deal!" They shook on it, and something in the gesture felt significant, like they were sealing more than just a temporary living arrangement. Ryan's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and felt his stomach drop. Unknown number, text message. "I know you think you're helping her, Ryan, but you're only making things worse. Victoria needs professional help, not an enabler. Be smart about this." He showed Victoria the screen. She read it and went pale. "Block the number," she said. "Already on it." Ryan blocked the contact, then opened his phone's settings and enabled additional spam filtering. "We should assume he's going to keep trying different numbers." "How did he even get your cell number? The building directory only has your landline." "I don't have a landline." They looked at each other, the implications sinking in. "He's been researching you," Victoria said quietly. "Looking you up online, finding ways to contact you. That's what he does. He researches, he plans, he finds vulnerabilities." Ryan thought about what Officer Reeves had said, about Marcus potentially digging into his life, about Emma. "I need to call Jenna," he said. He stepped into the bedroom and closed the door, then dialed his ex-wife's number. She answered on the second ring. "Emma's fine, in case you were worried," Jenna said dryly. "She's currently explaining the difference between a triceratops and a styracosaurus to a very patient grocery store clerk." "That's great. Listen, I need to talk to you about something." "That's never a good opening." Ryan explained the situation as succinctly as he could. Victoria, Marcus, the stalking, the decision to let her stay at his place. He didn't expect Jenna to be thrilled, but he hadn't expected the long silence that followed either. "You're joking," she finally said. "I'm not." "Ryan, you met this woman yesterday." "I know." "And you're letting her move into your apartment because her ex-boyfriend is stalking her." "Temporarily, and yes." Another silence. In the background, Ryan could hear Emma chattering about dinosaurs. "Is she standing right there?" Jenna asked. "She's in the living room." "So you're hiding in the bedroom to have this conversation?" "I'm not hiding. I'm being considerate." Jenna made a sound that was half laugh, half exasperation. "This is the kind of thing I'm talking about, Ryan. This is exactly the pattern that destroyed our marriage. You can't save everyone." "I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm helping one person who asked for help." "Did she ask? Or did you volunteer before she could even think of another option?" The question hit harder than Ryan wanted to admit. "Does it matter?" "It does if you're doing this to feel needed, rather than because it's actually the right thing to do." Jenna sighed. "Look, I'm not saying don't help her. I'm saying be aware of why you're helping her, and be honest about what you're getting out of it." "I'm not getting anything out of it." "Aren't you? You've been lonely since we split, Ryan. You fill your time with work and parenting, but I know you. I know you miss having someone to take care of, someone to fix things for. Just make sure you're not using this woman's crisis as a way to avoid dealing with your own stuff." Ryan wanted to argue, but a part of him recognized the truth in what she was saying. He did like feeling needed. He did like having a problem to solve that wasn't his own. "I'll be careful," he said instead. "That's all I'm asking. And Ryan, if this guy is as dangerous as you're saying, I need to know. I need to be able to protect Emma." "I'll keep you updated. I promise." "Okay. And for what it's worth, I don't think you're wrong to help her. I just think you need to help her with your eyes open." They talked for a few more minutes about logistics for the weekend, about Emma's dinosaur obsession, and her upcoming kindergarten registration. By the time Ryan hung up, he felt steadier, like he'd been reminded of what actually mattered. When he emerged from the bedroom, he found Victoria at the kitchen counter, her laptop open, working. She'd pulled her hair out of its bun, and it fell around her face in a way that made her look younger, less guarded. "Everything okay?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah, just giving Jenna a heads up about the situation." "How'd she take it?" "About as well as expected. She thinks I have a savior complex, and I'm using your crisis to avoid dealing with my own emotional issues." Victoria finally looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Do you?" Ryan considered lying, then decided against it. "Probably, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong to help you." "No," Victoria agreed. "It just means you're complicated. Everyone's complicated. The trick is finding people whose complications fit with yours." "Is that from a fortune cookie?" "Probably. I've eaten a lot of Chinese food in my life." They settled into an easy rhythm after that. Victoria worked on her laptop, taking calls and responding to emails with the kind of focused intensity that Ryan recognized from his own work mode. Ryan made dinner, pasta with marinara sauce, nothing fancy, and they ate while watching the news. At 9 p.m., Victoria's phone rang. She looked at the screen and froze. "It's my sister," she said. "Answer it." Victoria hesitated, then swiped to accept. "Hey, Melissa." Ryan couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he could see Victoria's face tighten with each passing second. "No, I'm not having a breakdown," Victoria said, her voice carefully controlled. "Marcus contacted you again, didn't he?" A pause. "What did he say?" Another pause, longer this time. "Melissa, listen to me. Marcus is lying. I'm not in danger from myself. I'm in danger from him. I filed for a restraining order today because he won't stop." She stopped abruptly, pulling the phone away from her ear. Even from across the room, Ryan could hear the tinny sound of someone yelling. Victoria's face had gone completely blank. "I have to go," she said quietly, and hung up. She set the phone down on the coffee table and stared at it like it might explode. She doesn't believe me, Victoria said. Her voice was completely flat. Marcus sent her some of my old emails, ones from when we first broke up, when I was still trying to be civil, and convinced her that I've been harassing him. She thinks I'm obsessed, that I can't let go. She said I need professional help, and she's talking to our mom about staging another intervention. Ryan moved to sit beside her. I'm sorry. He's so good at this. He knows exactly what to say, exactly how to twist things. And my sister wants to believe him because it's easier than believing that her successful, put-together older sister has spent the last 7 months being terrorized by her ex. It's not about what's easier. It's about what Marcus is selling. He's telling your sister a story where he's the victim and you're the villain, and he's doing it with enough detail and emotion that it feels true. Victoria turned to look at him, and the pain in her eyes was raw. What if he's right? What if I am obsessed? What if I've built this whole thing up in my head, and he's just a guy who won't take no for an answer, not an actual threat? Do you really believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. I'm so tired, Ryan. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of explaining myself, tired of no one believing me. Maybe it would be easier to just give him his 5 minutes, hear him out, and then he'd finally leave me alone. No, Ryan said firmly. That's what he wants you to think. That's the whole point of this campaign, to wear you down until you're so exhausted you'll do anything to make it stop. But giving in won't make it stop, Victoria. It'll just teach him that if he pushes hard enough, you'll break. How do you know? Because that's how people like Marcus operate. They don't want resolution. They want control. And the moment you give them an inch, they'll take everything. Victoria slumped back against the couch, her fight draining away. I don't know how to keep doing this. Then don't do it alone. That's why I'm here. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're smart and strong and you built a company from nothing. I know you knocked on my door instead of giving up. I know you're still fighting even though you're exhausted. That's enough. They sat in silence for a while, the television murmuring in the background about weather patterns and traffic accidents. Eventually, Victoria stood. I'm going to bed, she said, or at least I'm going to lie down and pretend I'm going to sleep. If you need anything, I know, thank you. She disappeared into the bedroom and Ryan was left alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that he'd involved himself in something far more complicated than he'd anticipated. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another text. You're making a mistake, Ryan, but I suppose you'll figure that out soon enough. Ryan blocked the number, then spent the next hour researching security systems he couldn't really afford. He looked up statistics on stalking, on restraining order violations, on the percentage of cases that escalated to physical violence. The numbers weren't comforting. At midnight, he heard a sound from the bedroom, soft, muffled. Victoria crying, trying to be quiet about it. Ryan stood, walked to the bedroom door, and knocked softly. Victoria? You okay? I'm fine. She wasn't fine, but he recognized the deflection, the need to maintain dignity even when everything was falling apart. Okay, he said. I'm out here if you need me. I know. Ryan went back to the couch, pulled the blanket over himself, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd call his landlord about security cameras. Tomorrow he'd check in with Officer Reeves about the restraining order timeline. Tomorrow he'd figure out how to explain to Emma that they had a house guest and why it was important to be extra careful about strangers. Tomorrow. Tonight, he just lay there, listening to the rain start up again, listening to Victoria's careful breathing from the next room, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into, and whether he had the strength to see it through to the end. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out, which meant 3 weeks of living in a state of suspended anxiety, waiting for Marcus to make his next move. Ryan had assumed the waiting would be the hardest part. He was wrong. The hardest part was watching Victoria try to pretend everything was normal. She worked from his apartment, taking calls in the bedroom with the door closed, her voice projecting the calm confidence of someone who had their life together. Then she'd emerge for coffee or lunch, and Ryan would see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly when she thought he wasn't looking. On the 4th day, Ryan came home from a grocery run to find Victoria sitting on the floor of his living room, surrounded by printed emails, organizing them into piles with a system only she understood. What are you doing? He asked, setting the bags on the counter. Building the case. Officer Reeves said documentation matters, so I'm making sure we have everything organized by theme. threats, manipulation, contact with third parties, evidence of surveillance. She didn't look up from her work. I found another 47 emails I'd missed the first time. They were in my spam folder. Ryan crouched down beside her. The emails were marked up with highlighter, notes written in the margins in Victoria's precise handwriting. You don't have to do this all at once. Yes, I do. If I stop, if I let myself think about what I'm reading, I'll... She stopped, her jaw tight. You'll what? I'll remember that I loved him once, that there was a version of Marcus who made me laugh, who understood my work in a way no one else did, who made me feel less alone. Her voice cracked. And then I'll have to reconcile that person with the one who's doing this to me, and I don't know how to do that. Ryan sat down fully, his back against the couch. My sister said something similar. She said the hardest part wasn't accepting that her ex was abusive. It was accepting that both versions of him were real, the good one and the bad one, that he wasn't secretly good underneath or secretly bad all along. He was just both, and the bad eventually swallowed the good. Victoria finally looked at him. How did she make peace with that? I don't think she did. Not completely, but she stopped trying to figure out which version was real and started focusing on which version was present, and the present version was hurting her, so she left. It sounds simple when you say it like that. It's not simple at all, but it's true. Victoria returned her attention to the emails, but her movements were slower now, less frantic. They worked in silence for a while, Ryan helping her organize pages while she explained her system. It was meticulous to the point of obsessive, which Ryan was beginning to understand was how Victoria dealt with chaos. She created order wherever she could. His phone rang around 2 p.m. Unknown number. Ryan had started letting them all go to voicemail, screening later to see if any were legitimate. This one, when he checked, was Marcus again. Ryan, it's Marcus. I think we got off on the wrong foot the other day. I'm not the enemy here. I'm just someone who cares about Victoria and is worried about the decision she's making. I'd like to meet with you. Just the two of us. No Victoria, no pressure. Coffee, public place. Let me show you the other side of this story. You seem like a reasonable guy. I think you'll understand once you hear my perspective. The voicemail was perfectly calibrated, friendly, reasonable, with just enough humility to seem genuine. Ryan deleted it and added the number to his growing blocked list. Him again? Victoria asked without looking up. Yeah, he wants to meet for coffee to give me his side of the story. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Of course he does. He's trying to create an alliance with you. If he can convince you I'm the problem, you'll either kick me out or start doubting everything I've told you. Either way, he wins. I'm not meeting with him. I know, but he'll keep trying. He's patient like that. The next escalation came 2 days later. Ryan was making dinner, stir-fry, which was one of maybe 5 things he could cook competently, when someone knocked on the door. Not the tentative knock Victoria had used that first night, but a firm, confident knock that expected to be answered. Victoria, who'd been working on her laptop at the kitchen table, went rigid. Stay here, Ryan said quietly. He approached the door and checked the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-30s, blonde, wearing business casual and holding a manila folder. She looked professional, official, not immediately threatening. Ryan opened the door with the chain still engaged. Can I help you? Hi, I'm looking for Victoria Hale. I'm Jennifer Morrison from King County Family Services in Washington. We received a concerning report about Ms. Hale's well-being, and I'm here to conduct a welfare check. Ryan's stomach dropped. King County is in Washington. This is Oregon. Ms. Hale is still a Washington resident, according to our records. The report indicated she might be in Portland, and we take all wellness concerns seriously. Jennifer smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Is she here? I just need to speak with her for a few minutes to verify that she's safe. Behind him, Ryan heard Victoria stand. Her voice was cold when she spoke. Marcus sent you. Jennifer's professional mask slipped slightly. The report was filed by a concerned party. Yes, but my job is to... Your job is to harass me on behalf of my stalker, Victoria said, moving to stand beside Ryan. I'm fine. I'm in no danger except from the man who filed that false report. And if you were actually from King County Family Services, you'd know that you have no jurisdiction in Oregon and that showing up at someone's door unannounced is a violation of protocol. Jennifer's smile disappeared entirely. Miss Hale, I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to help Marcus. How much did he pay you? I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You're not a social worker. You're either a private investigator or just someone he hired off Craigslist to come here and scare me. Either way, you need to leave. Now. Jennifer's expression hardened. I'm just trying to verify your safety. I'm standing here talking to you. I'm clearly fine. Goodbye. Ryan closed the door while Jennifer was still mid-sentence, then engaged the deadbolt. Through the peephole, he watched her stand there for a moment, indecision crossing her face, before finally walking away. Jesus, Ryan said, turning to Victoria. Was that real? The folder was a nice touch, but no. King County Family Services doesn't do cross-state wellness checks, and they definitely don't show up without calling first. Victoria's hands were shaking again. He's getting creative. We need to tell Officer Reeves. And say what? Someone knocked on the door pretending to be a social worker? We don't have proof Marcus sent her. It's just my word, and my word hasn't been worth much lately. Ryan pulled out his phone. The building has security cameras in the hallway. If that woman shows up again, we'll have footage. If she shows up again, Marcus will have already moved on to his next strategy. That's how this works, Ryan. He throws things at the wall to see what sticks, and by the time I react to one thing, he's already 3 moves ahead. She sank back into her chair at the table, her brief flash of defiance fading into defeat. Ryan wanted to say something reassuring, something that would make her feel safer. But he was beginning to understand that there was no safety in this situation, just varying degrees of threat management. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Jennifer Morrison and her manila folder, about the calm way she'd lied, about how close she'd come to actually getting Victoria to open the door. If Victoria had been alone, would she have fallen for it? Would she have let the woman inside? At 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep and went to his computer. He started researching Marcus Chen, really researching him, digging past the surface-level LinkedIn profile and professional accolades. He found old forum posts from Marcus's college years, back when he'd been active in debate circles. The posts were arrogant, dismissive of anyone who disagreed with him. There were complaints from former colleagues on sites like Glassdoor, carefully worded to avoid liability, but clearly describing someone who manipulated and undermined. One review from someone who'd worked at Victoria's company before Marcus was fired stood out. COO has severe control issues and retaliates against anyone who challenges him. HR is aware, but nothing ever changes. Talented people keep leaving because of the hostile work environment he creates. Ryan screenshotted everything, adding it to the growing file of documentation. He was so absorbed in his research that he didn't notice Victoria until she spoke. "You're up late." He jumped, nearly knocking over his coffee mug. Victoria stood in the hallway in an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair messy from sleep. "Couldn't shut my brain off," Ryan said. "Did I wake you?" "No, I don't really sleep anymore. Maybe an hour or 2 at a time." She moved into the kitchen and started making tea. "What are you working on?" "Background on Marcus. I found some interesting reviews from former coworkers." Victoria's smile was sad. "Let me guess, everyone says he's brilliant but impossible to work with." "More or less." That was the warning sign I ignored. When I hired him, 3 people told me he had interpersonal challenges. I thought I could manage it, thought my company culture was strong enough to contain him. She poured hot water over a tea bag, watching it steep. Turned out he was better at reshaping culture than I was at maintaining it. You fired him eventually. After he'd already done significant damage, half my senior team quit in the year he was COO. The ones who stayed did so out of loyalty to me, not because they thought the company was healthy. She brought her mug to the couch and curled up in the corner. "I've been thinking about your ex-wife, about what she said to you." Ryan closed his laptop and joined her. "Which part? About you having a savior complex? About using my crisis to avoid your own stuff?" Victoria took a sip of tea. "She's not wrong, is she?" "Probably not. So why are you still helping me?" Ryan considered his answer carefully. "Because even if my motivations are partially selfish, the help is still real. And because I'd rather be someone who helps for complicated reasons than someone who doesn't help at all." "That's very evolved of you. My therapist would be proud. I've been ignoring her calls for 3 weeks. Victoria laughed, surprised. "You have a therapist?" "Had. I stopped going after the divorce was finalized because I convinced myself I'd figured everything out. Turns out, I just got better at avoiding the hard stuff." What hard stuff? Ryan hesitated, then figured he owed her honesty. The fact that I'm 32 and my only meaningful relationship ended because I couldn't figure out how to be a partner instead of a caretaker. The fact that I love my daughter more than anything, but I'm terrified I'm going to screw her up the same way my dad screwed me up. The fact that I took a job in tech support because it was safe and easy, and now I'm stuck in a career I don't care about because I'm too scared to risk trying something else. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Your dad screwed you up? He left when I was 10, came home one day, said he couldn't do it anymore, and walked out. My mom fell apart. My sister was 7 and didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming back. So I became the man of the house, the one who held everything together. And I've been holding things together ever since, whether people want me to or not. That's a lot to carry. Yeah, well, we all have our shit. Ryan managed to smile. At least mine doesn't involve being stalked by an ex who won't take no for an answer. Give it time. You've only known me a week. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking their respective caffeinated beverages at an hour when normal people were sleeping. Ryan realized this had become their routine. Late nights talking, sharing pieces of themselves they probably wouldn't share in daylight, building something that felt like friendship but with sharper edges. Can I ask you something? Victoria said eventually. Sure. Why did you really let me stay here? The real reason, not the nice answer you give when I ask in front of other people. Ryan took a breath. Because when you knocked on my door, you looked exactly like my sister looked that night she finally left her ex. Terrified, exhausted, trying so hard to hold it together that you were vibrating with the effort. And I didn't help her back then. I was in college, dealing with my own stuff, and I told her she'd figure it out. She did, eventually. But she did it alone, and I've felt guilty about that for years. So I'm your redemption project. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to be the person I wish I'd been 10 years ago. Victoria nodded slowly. That's honest. I appreciate that. Does it bother you, knowing that part of why I'm helping is about my own issues? Not really. I built my entire company partly to prove to my father that I didn't need him, that I could be successful without his approval. Motivation is complicated. What matters is the outcome. Very pragmatic. I'm a CEO. Pragmatic is kind of the job description. Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and felt his pulse spike. Emma's school, calling at 2:43 a.m. He answered immediately. Hello? Mr. Carter? This is Sandra Chen from Little Explorers Academy's emergency line. The woman's voice was apologetic. I'm so sorry to call at this hour, but we received some concerning information about your daughter and wanted to verify it with you directly before taking any action. Ryan's mouth went dry. What kind of information? We received a call from someone claiming to be your brother, saying that there's been a family emergency and that he needs to pick Emma up from school tomorrow. When we asked for verification, he became agitated and mentioned that you're currently dealing with a mental health crisis and may not be reliable about pickup arrangements. I don't have a brother. That's what we suspected, which is why we called. We have your ex-wife listed as the emergency contact, but given the hour, we wanted to alert you first. Ryan closed his eyes, trying to control the anger flooding through him. The person who called. Did he give a name? Marcus Chen. He said he was your business partner as well as your brother, and that you'd recently had a breakdown related to work stress. Of course. Of course Marcus would go after Emma. Marcus Chen is not my brother or my business partner, Ryan said, forcing his voice to stay level. He's someone who's been harassing a friend of mine, and apparently he's now escalating to threats against my daughter. I need you to put a note in Emma's file that under no circumstances is anyone except myself or Jennifer Carter, my ex-wife, allowed to pick her up. Anyone else who calls claiming to be family should be reported to the police immediately. We'll make that note right now. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this, Mr. Carter. Thank you for calling. He hung up and immediately dialed Jenna. She answered on the 4th ring, groggy and confused. Ryan? What's wrong? Marcus called Emma's school pretending to be my brother, tried to get authorization to pick her up, said I was having a mental health crisis. The grogginess vanished from Jenna's voice. He what? Ryan explained, watching Victoria's face go pale as she listened to his side of the conversation. When he finished, Jenna was silent for a long moment. I'm coming to get Emma right now, she said. She's staying with me until this is resolved. Jenna, no. No arguments, Ryan. You said this guy was harassing your neighbor. You didn't say he was threatening our daughter. He's not threatening her. He's trying to get to Victoria through me. I don't care what his motivation is. He involved Emma. That's the line. Jenna's voice was steel. I'm picking her up in 20 minutes, and she's staying with me until you get that restraining order in place, and this situation is under control. Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to say that running wouldn't solve anything, but Jenna was right. Emma's safety came first before everything else. Okay, he said quietly. I'll call you tomorrow. You'll call me every day until this is over. And Ryan, I meant what I said before. I think helping Victoria is the right thing to do, but not at Emma's expense. I know, I'm sorry. Don't apologize, just fix it. She hung up. Ryan sat there, phone in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. Marcus had crossed a line. There was harassment, and then there was going after a 5-year-old girl. I'm leaving, Victoria said abruptly. Ryan looked up. She was already standing, already moving toward the bedroom. What? I can't stay here. I can't put Emma at risk. I'll find a hotel. Victoria, stop. He called her school, Ryan. He tried to use your daughter to get to me. That's not okay. None of this is okay. You're right, it's not okay, which is why we're not running. Ryan stood, blocking her path to the bedroom. We're going back to Officer Reeves tomorrow morning, and we're escalating this. Threatening a child, even indirectly, changes everything. It won't matter. He didn't actually threaten her. He just lied to the school. That's not illegal. It's harassment. It's using a minor as leverage, and combined with everything else, it establishes a pattern of escalation. Ryan kept his voice firm. You leaving won't make Emma safer. It'll just teach Marcus that threats work, that he can force us to do what he wants by going after the people we care about. Victoria's eyes were wet. I don't want to be the reason something happens to your daughter. You're not the reason. Marcus is. And we're going to stop him. The hearing for the stalking protective order was set for 11 a.m. on a Thursday, which gave Ryan exactly 3 days to convince Victoria not to bolt and exactly 0 hours of good sleep. Officer Reeves had taken his report about the school incident seriously, adding it to the file and recommending that Ryan document everything, which he was already doing obsessively. The morning of the hearing, Victoria emerged from the bedroom wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Ryan's monthly rent. She'd pulled her hair back severely, applied minimal makeup, and transformed herself into the polished CEO version of herself that he rarely saw. You look terrifying, Ryan said. Good. That's the point. She checked her reflection in the mirror by the door, adjusting an earring. I need the judge to see someone competent and credible, not someone who's falling apart. You are competent and credible. I'm also terrified, exhausted, and one bad question away from crying in court. But they don't need to see that. They drove to the courthouse in silence. Ryan had taken the day off work, telling his boss he had a family emergency. It wasn't technically a lie. Victoria had become something like family in the past 2 weeks, in the way that crisis bonded people faster than normal time. The courthouse was downtown, an imposing building that smelled like floor polish and stress. They found the right courtroom on the 3rd floor and sat in the hallway, waiting. Victoria's leg bounced nervously, and she kept checking her phone even though there were no messages. At 10:47, a man in an expensive suit walked past them toward the courtroom. Mid-30s, Asian, carrying a leather briefcase. He didn't look at them, but Ryan felt Victoria go rigid beside him. That's him, she whispered. That's Marcus. Ryan studied the man who'd been making their lives hell for the past 2 weeks. Marcus looked exactly like his LinkedIn photo. Polished, professional, the kind of person you'd trust in a business meeting. There was nothing in his appearance that screamed stalker or abuser. He looked normal, successful, reasonable, which was, Ryan realized, exactly the point. Marcus entered the courtroom, and a minute later a bailiff called their case. Victoria stood, smoothing her suit jacket, and Ryan saw her slip on that professional mask one more time. The courtroom was smaller than Ryan expected, just a judge's bench, a few rows of seats, and a table for each party. Marcus sat at one table with a lawyer Ryan hadn't known he'd be bringing. Victoria sat at the other, alone except for Ryan beside her. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. She reviewed the petition, then looked up. Ms. Hale, you're petitioning for a stalking protective order against Marcus Chen based on allegations of harassment and cyberstalking. Mr. Chen, you're represented by counsel. Let's hear from the petitioner first. Victoria stood. Her voice was steady when she spoke, laying out the facts with the same precision she'd used in the police station. She referenced the documentation, described the pattern of behavior, explained the escalation. She didn't embellish or editorialize. She just presented the evidence. When she got to the part about Marcus calling Emma's school, Ryan saw the judge's expression shift. Marcus's lawyer stood when it was his turn. She was young, aggressive, clearly expensive. Your Honor, my client categorically denies these allegations. What we have here is a classic case of a difficult breakup being weaponized. Ms. Hale and Mr. Chen were in both a professional and romantic relationship. When that relationship ended, Ms. Hale retaliated by terminating Mr. Chen's employment without cause and cutting off all contact. My client's attempts to communicate have been entirely appropriate, trying to resolve business matters, ensure the return of personal property, and maintain civil contact with someone he cared about deeply. Attempts to communicate, the judge repeated dryly. How many communications are we talking about? My client sent approximately 20 emails over 7 months, Your Honor, hardly the volume that constitutes stalking. Victoria's hand tightened on the table. Ryan saw her start to speak, then stop herself. The judge looked at Victoria. Ms. Hale, do you have a response to that number? Your Honor, I have documentation of 347 emails from Mr. Chen across multiple accounts, not including the voicemails, text messages from burner phones, and contact with third parties, including my family members and employees. Victoria's voice was still steady, but Ryan could hear the anger underneath. I'd be happy to provide the full documentation to the court. The judge turned to Marcus's lawyer. Counselor, did you verify your client's claim about the number of communications? The lawyer hesitated just long enough for Ryan to know she hadn't. Your Honor, my client has been honest with me about... That's not what I asked. Did you independently verify? No, Your Honor. Then I suggest you don't make claims you can't back up. The judge adjusted her glasses. Ms. Hale, I'd like to see that documentation. Victoria pulled out the binder they'd prepared, organized, tabbed, cross-referenced. The judge flipped through it, her expression growing darker with each page. Mr. Chen, she said finally, looking at Marcus directly, did you call Little Explorers Academy 2 days ago claiming to be the brother of one Ryan Carter? Marcus stood, his expression earnest. Your Honor, I was concerned about Ms. Hale's mental state and the influence she might be having on Mr. Carter, who is an innocent bystander in this situation. I thought if I could speak with someone close to him, I might be able to help Victoria get the professional help she clearly needs. So you lied to a school and attempted to gain access to a 5-year-old child? I never attempted to gain access to the child. I just wanted to verify that Ms. Hale wasn't creating unsafe situations for the people around her. The judge leaned back in her chair. Mr. Chen, I've been on the bench for 23 years. I've heard every variation of this story. The concerned ex, the worried former colleague, the person who just wants to help. And you know what all those stories have in common? The person telling them thinks they're the hero, and the person they're fixating on is the villain who needs to be saved from themselves. Your Honor, I'm not finished. What I see in front of me is a clear pattern of unwanted contact, escalating behavior, and a fundamental refusal to accept that the relationship is over. Whether you believe you're helping or not is irrelevant. The impact on Ms. Hale is what matters, and the impact has been substantial. Marcus's lawyer stood. Your Honor, if I may... You may not. Sit down. The judge looked at Victoria. Ms. Hale, I'm granting your petition for a stalking protective order. Mr. Chen is hereby prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly, from coming within 500 feet of your residence or workplace, and from contacting any third parties for the purpose of obtaining information about you or communicating messages to you. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place for 1 year, subject to renewal. Victoria's breath left her in a rush. Ryan saw her grip the edge of the table to steady herself. Mr. Chen, the judge continued, I'm also ordering you to surrender any keys, access codes, or other means of entry you may have to Ms. Hale's residence or vehicle. You will have no contact with her whatsoever. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand? Marcus's expression had gone cold. The reasonable mask had slipped, and underneath was something harder, angrier. Your Honor, this is... Do you understand the terms of this order? A long pause. Then, through what looked like considerable effort. Yes, Your Honor. Good. We're adjourned. The judge stood and swept out of the courtroom. Marcus and his lawyer huddled together, speaking in low, urgent tones. Victoria just sat there, staring at the table in front of her. You okay? Ryan asked quietly. I don't know. I think so. She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright. Did that really just happen? Yeah, it really did. They gathered their things and left the courtroom quickly, not looking at Marcus. In the hallway, Victoria's professional composure finally cracked. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard. I thought he'd win, she said. I thought his lawyer would twist everything, and the judge would side with him, and I'd walk out of there with nothing. But you didn't. You won. I got a piece of paper that says he has to leave me alone. That's not the same as him actually leaving me alone. Ryan knew she was right. Restraining orders were only effective if people followed them, and Marcus didn't strike him as someone who respected boundaries. They were halfway to the parking garage when Ryan's phone rang. Jenna. Hey, he answered. Everything okay? Emma's fine. She's at school. But Ryan, someone sent flowers to my office this morning. Ryan stopped walking. What? Expensive flowers. Roses, lilies, the whole thing. The card said, my apologies for any confusion. I hope we can move past this misunderstanding. It was signed Marcus Chen. Victoria had gone pale. He's trying to manipulate your ex-wife now. Jenna, did you call the police? Ryan asked. I called the florist first, asked them who ordered it. They said a man matching Marcus's description came in person yesterday and paid cash. They have security footage. Send that footage to Officer Reeves. This is a violation of the restraining order. He's making indirect contact through you. Already done. I called that Officer Reeves you mentioned before I called you. She said she'd follow up. Ryan felt something loosen in his chest. Jenna was taking this seriously, treating it like the threat it was. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep Emma out of this. That's all I ask. I will. I promise. He hung up and relayed the conversation to Victoria. She was shaking her head. He's not going to stop. The restraining order doesn't matter to him. It's just another obstacle to work around. Maybe. But now when he violates it, there are consequences. Real ones. They made it back to Ryan's apartment without incident. Victoria immediately went to the bedroom and closed the door. Ryan gave her space, knowing she needed time to process. An hour later, she emerged and her eyes were red. I called my mom, she said. Told her about the restraining order. She said she was glad I finally got help, that she'd been so worried about me. That's good, right? She thinks I got help for my mental health issues. She still believes, Marcus, that I'm the one who's unstable. The restraining order just confirmed it in her mind. I'm so delusional that I had to get the courts involved to protect me from my concerned ex-boyfriend. Ryan didn't know what to say to that. Sometimes there were no words. I also talked to my sister, Victoria continued. Or I tried to. She hung up on me after 30 seconds, said she couldn't enable my delusions anymore. I'm sorry. It's fine, I expected it. But her voice said it wasn't fine at all. Marcus spent months poisoning them against me. One restraining order isn't going to undo that. They ordered dinner that night, Thai food, because neither of them had the energy to cook. They ate in front of the television, watching something mindless and forgettable, not talking about the hearing or Marcus or any of it. At some point, Victoria fell asleep on the couch, her head tilted back at an angle that would give her a terrible crick in her neck. Ryan grabbed a blanket from the closet and carefully draped it over her. She stirred but didn't wake. He stood there for a moment, looking at her sleeping face. The lines of stress that had been permanent fixtures for 2 weeks had smoothed out slightly. She looked younger like this, less guarded. Ryan's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your victory today. I hope you're proud of yourself for enabling someone's self-destruction. This isn't over. He blocked the number and added it to the log Officer Reeves had told him to keep. Then he took a photo of Victoria sleeping peacefully under the blanket, because he wanted to remember that even in the middle of all this chaos, there were moments of quiet. Moments where the fear receded and what was left was just two people trying to survive. He didn't send the photo to anyone, didn't post it or share it, just kept it for himself, evidence that they were doing something right. Outside, rain started falling again, the sound familiar and almost comforting now. Ryan settled into the armchair across from the couch, watching Victoria sleep. keeping guard, even though there was probably nothing to guard against. But probably wasn't the same as definitely, and after everything that had happened, he wasn't taking chances. At 3 a.m., Victoria woke with a start, disoriented. "You're okay," Ryan said quietly from the chair. "You fell asleep on the couch." She blinked at him, then at the blanket covering her. "Did you stay up all night?" "Couldn't sleep anyway." "Ryan, I know. I need to sleep. I will. Eventually." He rubbed his face. "Marcus texted me. Said this isn't over." Victoria's expression hardened. "Screenshot it and send it to Officer Reeves." "Already done." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Thank you. For today. For all of it. You already thanked me." "I know. But I'll probably keep thanking you, so get used to it." Ryan smiled despite his exhaustion. "I can live with that." They sat in the quiet darkness, two people bound together by circumstance and choice, neither quite sure what came next but committed to figuring it out together. And outside, Marcus Chen sat in his car 3 blocks away, watching Ryan's building on his phone's GPS tracker, planning his next move with the patience of someone who believed time was on his side. He was wrong, but it would take them a while to prove it. The restraining order held for exactly 9 days before Marcus tested it. Ryan was at work, halfway through explaining to an increasingly frustrated nurse why her password reset wasn't working when Officer Reeves called. He excused himself and stepped into the stairwell. "We have a situation," Reeves said without preamble. "Marcus Chen showed up at Victoria's office building this morning." Ryan's grip on the phone tightened. "He what?" "Didn't make contact with her directly. He waited in the lobby coffee shop across from the elevators. One of her employees recognized him from the restraining order paperwork Victoria had circulated to her staff. They called us, and we picked him up before he could approach her." "Is Victoria okay?" "Shaken, but fine. She's giving a statement now. I need you to come down to the station when you can. Marcus is claiming he was there for a meeting with a different company in the same building, says he had no idea Victoria worked there." "That's bullshit." "I know, but we need to prove it. Can you get here in the next hour?" Ryan was already heading for his car. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He texted Victoria on the drive. Reeves called. "On my way to the station. You okay?" Her response came quickly. Physically, yes. Everything else, no. He was just sitting there drinking coffee like he had every right to be there. Ryan wanted to say something comforting, something that would make this better, but there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound hollow, so he just wrote, "Almost there." At the station, Reeves led him to the same conference room where they'd first reported the harassment. Victoria was already there, sitting rigid in her chair, still wearing her work clothes, gray slacks and a white blouse that somehow made her look both professional and fragile. "He's lying," she said as soon as Ryan sat down. "There's no other company in that building he'd have business with. I know every tenant because I vetted the location specifically to avoid conflicts of interest with potential clients." "We're checking his story," Reeves said. "But even if he did have legitimate business there, the restraining order specifies he can't come within 500 feet of your workplace. The building counts." "So you can arrest him?" "We already did. He's being held pending a violation hearing. If the judge finds he violated the order, he could face jail time." Victoria's laugh was sharp and humorless. "He won't go to jail. His lawyer will argue it was an honest mistake, that he didn't realize my office was in that building, and the judge will give him a warning." "Maybe," Reeves said, "but maybe not. Judges don't like it when people treat their orders like suggestions." Ryan watched Victoria's face, saw the war between hope and cynicism playing out. She wanted to believe the system would protect her, but 7 months of experience had taught her otherwise. "What happens now?" Ryan asked. "We keep him overnight, bring him before a judge tomorrow morning. Victoria, you'll need to be there to testify that you work in that building and that you believe his presence was intentional." "Of course it was intentional. He wanted me to know he could get that close whenever he wanted. He wanted me to feel unsafe in my own office." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "And it worked. I spent the rest of the morning looking over my shoulder, jumping every time someone walked past my door." Reeves's expression softened. "I know this is hard, but you're doing the right thing. Every time he violates the order, every time we document it, it builds the case that he's dangerous and needs serious consequences." After they finished at the station, Ryan drove Victoria back to his apartment. She was silent the entire way, staring out the window at the gray Portland afternoon. You should eat something, Ryan said when they got inside. I'm not hungry. Victoria, I said I'm not hungry. She moved to the couch and sat down heavily. I keep thinking about his face when I saw him in that lobby. He was smiling, Ryan, not a threatening smile or a creepy smile, just a normal, pleasant smile, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Ryan sat down beside her, leaving space between them. He wanted you to see him. That was the whole point. I know. And I hate that it worked. I hate that I'm sitting here terrified when I should be relieved that he got arrested. But all I can think about is what happens when he gets out. Because he will get out, probably tomorrow. And then what? He'll be angry. He'll want revenge for being humiliated. Or maybe he'll finally realize there are real consequences and back off. Victoria looked at him like he'd suggested the earth was flat. You don't actually believe that. No, Ryan admitted, but I'm trying to be optimistic. Stop. I need you to be realistic, not optimistic. I need you to help me plan for what comes next, not pretend everything's going to magically get better. She was right. Ryan had been so focused on trying to make her feel better that he'd forgotten she didn't need comfort. She needed strategy. Okay, he said. Realistic assessment. Marcus is escalating despite the restraining order. He's testing boundaries, seeing what he can get away with. Tomorrow's hearing will either result in actual jail time, which might slow him down, or a warning, which will confirm that the consequences aren't serious enough to stop him. And if it's a warning, then we escalate too. We go to the media, we file a civil suit, we make enough noise that he can't operate in the shadows anymore. Victoria considered that. Going public would hurt my business. Clients don't want to work with someone who comes with drama. Clients also don't want to work with someone who's too terrified to function. Right now, you're spending half your energy looking over your shoulder instead of focusing on your work. That's not sustainable. Neither is being known as the CEO who got stalked by her ex-COO. The optics are terrible either way. Ryan didn't have a good answer to that. She was trapped between bad options, and nothing he said would change that fundamental reality. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then thought better of it and put it on speaker. Ryan Carter? The voice was unfamiliar. Male, professional. Who's asking? My name is David Chen. I'm Marcus's brother. I was hoping we could talk about what's happening with my brother and Ms. Hale. Ryan and Victoria exchanged glances. I don't think that's a good idea, Ryan said. Please, just hear me out. I know Marcus has made mistakes, but he's not a bad person. He's just struggling with the end of a relationship and making poor decisions. If we could all sit down together, you, me, Marcus, Victoria, I think we could resolve this without involving the courts anymore. Marcus violated a restraining order this morning, Ryan said flatly. There's nothing to resolve except the consequences of his actions. He didn't know Victoria worked in that building. He was there for a legitimate business meeting. The whole thing is a misunderstanding. Victoria leaned forward, her voice cold. There is no David Chen. Marcus is an only child. Silence on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, Victoria continued. Who did you say you were again? The line went dead. Ryan stared at his phone. He's trying to set up a meeting, using a fake relative as cover. He's done this before. Back in Seattle, someone claiming to be my concerned colleague called my therapist trying to get information about my sessions. When the therapist refused, they tried to file a complaint against her for not taking their concerns seriously. Victoria's voice was bitter. Marcus is good at creating narratives where he's the worried good guy, and I'm the troubled woman who needs intervention. We need to document this. Every call, every attempt. I know. I have a file that's probably 3 inches thick by now. She pulled out her phone and started typing notes about the call. You know what the worst part is? Part of me wondered, just for a second, if maybe talking to him would make this stop. If I gave him those 5 minutes he keeps asking for, maybe he'd finally leave me alone. You know that's not how this works. I know, but I'm tired, Ryan. I'm so tired of being afraid all the time, of jumping at shadows, of not being able to trust that the people around me believe what I'm telling them. She set her phone down. My own mother thinks I'm having a breakdown. My sister won't speak to me. Half my board is probably wondering if they should replace me with someone more stable. And meanwhile, Marcus gets to play the victim, the concerned ex who just wants to help the poor, confused woman who's pushing him away. Ryan wanted to tell her it would get better, that eventually people would see the truth, But he was starting to understand that sometimes the truth didn't matter as much as the story people wanted to believe. And Marcus was very good at telling a believable story. "What do you need right now?" he asked instead. Victoria thought about it. "Honestly, I need to feel like I have some control over something. Anything. Okay, then let's take control of what we can. Tomorrow, we go to that hearing and we make sure the judge understands the pattern. We bring every piece of documentation we have. We make it impossible for Marcus to claim this was an accident. And if the judge doesn't care, then we try something else, but we don't give up." Victoria nodded slowly, some of the fight coming back into her eyes. "Okay, yeah, let's do that." They spent the rest of the evening preparing for the hearing, organizing evidence, rehearsing testimony. By 10 p.m., they had a folder full of documentation that painted a clear picture of Marcus's escalating behavior. It should have been enough. Ryan wasn't sure it would be. The violation hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m., which meant another morning of Victoria armoring herself in her professional persona, and Ryan pretending he wasn't running on 4 hours of sleep and anxiety. They arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early and sat in the same hallway as before, watching lawyers and defendants and victims cycle through the system. Marcus arrived at 8:55 with his lawyer, both of them looking polished and confident. He glanced at Victoria once, and his expression was so neutral it was almost worse than if he'd been angry. Like she was just another item on his calendar, nothing personal. The hearing itself was quick and brutal in its efficiency. The judge, a different one from the protective order hearing, an older man with reading glasses and a perpetual frown, reviewed the evidence while they waited. "Mr. Chen," he said finally, "you were found in the lobby of 550 Salmon Street yesterday morning at approximately 10:15 a.m. The restraining order clearly states you're to stay 500 feet away from Ms. Hale's place of employment. Her office is on the 7th floor of that building. How do you explain your presence?" Marcus stood, his posture respectful but not submissive. "Your Honor, I was there for a meeting with Cascade Consulting Group, which also has offices in that building. I had no idea Ms. Hale's company was located there. The building houses over 30 different businesses. Did you have this meeting?" "It was scheduled for 10:30. I arrived early and stopped for coffee in the lobby while I waited." "And you didn't think to check whether Ms. Hale's office was in the building before you went?" "Your Honor, with respect, I can't be expected to avoid every location in Portland on the off chance that Ms. Hale might be there. I have a business to run and professional obligations to meet." The judge turned to Victoria. "Ms. Hale, when did you move your office to this location?" 6 weeks ago, Your Honor. I sent notification of the address change to my entire contact list, which included Mr. Chen's last known email address." "And Mr. Chen, did you receive this notification?" Marcus's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client has blocked all communications from Ms. Hale, as is his right under the mutual no-contact provisions of the restraining order. If she sent such a notification, he wouldn't have received it." The judge made a note. "Ms. Hale, is your company listed in any public directories with this address?" "Yes, Your Honor. Our website, our business filings, LinkedIn, and several industry databases. So this information is publicly available and easily discoverable." "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, did you attempt to verify whether Ms. Hale's office was in this building before you scheduled your meeting there?" A pause, just long enough to be noticeable. "No, Your Honor. I didn't think it was necessary." "You didn't think it was necessary to ensure you wouldn't violate a court order?" "Your Honor, I was focused on my business meeting. The thought genuinely didn't occur to me." Ryan watched the judge's expression, trying to read whether he believed Marcus or not. It was impossible to tell. "Here's what I'm going to do," the judge said. "Mr. Chen, I find that you did technically violate the terms of the restraining order by being in Miss Hale's workplace. However, I also find that the violation appears to have been unintentional rather than malicious. You're fortunate that you were arrested before you made any contact with Ms. Hale." Victoria's shoulders slumped slightly. "That said," the judge continued, "ignorance is not an excuse. You have a responsibility to know where Ms. Hale works and to avoid those locations, even if it's inconvenient for your business operations. I'm sentencing you to 30 days in jail, suspended pending compliance with the restraining order. If you violate the order again, for any reason, intentional or not, you'll serve that time. Do you understand?" Marcus's expression barely flickered. "Yes, Your Honor. Additionally, I'm extending the restraining order for another year and adding a provision that you must verify the location of any business meeting against Ms. Hale's known addresses before attending. Ms. Hale, I recommend you maintain a current list of your business locations and file it with the court monthly so there can be no question about whether Mr. Chen had access to that information. Yes, Your Honor, Victoria said quietly. We're adjourned. Outside the courtroom, Victoria walked straight to the parking garage without speaking. Ryan followed, giving her space to process. Only when they were in his car, doors closed and engine running, did she finally react. Suspended sentence. Of course it's a suspended sentence. She wasn't crying, but her voice was raw. He violated a court order, and the consequence is a threat of jail time if he does it again, which he will because he always does. And then what? Another suspended sentence? Another warning? He did get consequences, Ryan offered. The judge extended the order, added new restrictions. Restrictions he'll find ways around. That's what he does, Ryan. He finds the loopholes, the gray areas, the technically not violations that still accomplish his goal of making me feel unsafe. Ryan didn't argue, because she was right. Suspended sentences only worked if people were afraid of the consequences, and Marcus clearly wasn't. They drove in silence for several blocks. Then Victoria said, I need to go back to my apartment. I've been avoiding it, but I have files I need, equipment for tomorrow's client meeting, and I can't keep hiding forever. I'll come with you. Ryan, non-negotiable, you're not going up there alone. She looked like she wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. Fine. Victoria's apartment was on the 4th floor, directly above Ryan's. She unlocked the door carefully, checking the hallway first like she'd been taught. The apartment was smaller than Ryan expected. A studio with high ceilings and large windows that let in gray afternoon light. It was meticulously organized, everything in its place, the kind of space that belonged to someone who needed control over their environment because they had so little control over everything else. I'll just be a few minutes, Victoria said, moving to her desk and starting to pack up her laptop and files. Ryan stood by the door doing what he'd done increasingly over the past few weeks, scanning for threats, checking windows, listening for footsteps in the hallway. He'd become hyper-vigilant without meaning to, always on alert, always waiting for the next crisis. Ryan, can you help me with something? Victoria was standing by her closet holding a box. I need to get this down from the top shelf, but I can't quite reach. He moved to help her, and that's when he saw it. A small camera tucked into the corner of the closet, barely visible behind some folded sweaters. It was angled toward the bed. Victoria, he said quietly, don't move. What? There's a camera in your closet. All the color drained from her face. She turned slowly, following his gaze, and when she saw it, she made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. How long has that been there, Ryan asked, pulling out his phone to take photos. I don't know. I haven't been up here in weeks. He could have, when he had the key, before I changed the locks. She backed away from the closet like it might attack her. He's been watching me, in my own bedroom. She didn't finish the sentence, just stood there, shaking, while Ryan documented the camera from every angle before carefully removing it without touching the parts that might have fingerprints. We're calling Officer Reeves right now, he said. This is illegal surveillance. This is serious. He'll say he installed it when we were together with my permission and just forgot to remove it when we broke up. Cameras like this weren't even on the market when you were together. I recognize the model. It's from this year. Ryan was already dialing Reeves. This is evidence of breaking and entering, illegal surveillance, and potentially stalking. This changes everything. Reeves arrived within 20 minutes with a crime scene tech. They photographed the camera in place, dusted for prints, and searched the rest of the apartment for additional devices. They found 2 more, one in the bathroom, one by the front door. All recently installed, all clearly purchased within the past few months. These are good, Reeves said, carefully bagging the evidence. Really good. If we can tie these to Marcus Chen through purchase records or fingerprints, this moves from civil restraining order territory into criminal stalking charges. That's actual jail time, not suspended sentences. Victoria was sitting on her couch, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. He's been watching me get dressed, shower, sleep, for weeks, maybe months. We'll find out exactly how long, Reeves said gently. The cameras store footage on internal memory cards. We'll be able to see when they were installed and access any recordings. I want to see the footage. Victoria, I don't think I need to know. I need to see what he saw, understand how badly I've been violated. Don't tell me what I can handle. Reeves looked at Ryan, who shrugged helplessly. This was Victoria's choice to make. Okay, Reeves said. But let's do it at the station, with proper chain of custody. And Victoria, I want you to prepare yourself. Whatever's on these cameras, it's not going to be easy to watch. They went back to the police station for what felt like the 100th time. Reeves disappeared with the cameras, while Ryan and Victoria waited in a conference room. Victoria had gone very quiet, her processing mode that Ryan recognized by now. She wasn't shutting down. She was cataloging, analyzing, preparing herself for what came next. When Reeves returned, her expression was grim. The cameras were installed 3 weeks ago. We have footage of someone entering the apartment using a key, male, approximately Marcus Chen's height and build, though we can't see his face clearly. He installed all 3 cameras and tested them before leaving. 3 weeks ago, I was in Seattle for a client meeting, Victoria said. He must have known I'd be gone. The footage after installation shows you going about your normal routine, getting dressed, working from home, sleeping, nothing sexual or explicit, but still deeply invasive. I want to see it. Victoria Schul? Show me. Reeves pulled up a video file on her laptop and turned it toward Victoria. Ryan watched her face as she watched herself on screen, unaware of being observed, moving through her space in the privacy that turned out to be an illusion. Victoria made it through about 90 seconds before she pushed the laptop away. That's enough. We have enough here to charge Marcus with burglary, stalking, and invasion of privacy, Reeves said. All criminal charges, all carrying potential jail time. We'll need to move fast before he realizes we found the cameras and tries to destroy evidence or flee. How fast? We can pick him up tonight. Bring him in for questioning, execute a search warrant on his residence and vehicle for purchase records or other surveillance equipment. With luck, we'll have him in custody by morning. Victoria nodded mechanically. Do it. I need you to know, this is going to get worse before it gets better. When Marcus realizes we found the cameras, when he's arrested and charged, he's going to be angry. Really angry. We'll do everything we can to keep you safe, but I need you to be prepared for escalation. I've been preparing for escalation for 7 months, Victoria said. At least now there's a finish line. Reeves left to coordinate the arrest. Ryan and Victoria sat in the conference room, neither quite knowing what to say. The discovery of the cameras had shifted something fundamental. Before, Marcus's stalking had been abstract. Emails and phone calls and psychological manipulation. Now it was visceral, physical, an invasion that couldn't be rationalized or dismissed. I need to move, Victoria said eventually. I can't go back to that apartment. Even if he's in jail, even if we sweep for more cameras, I'll never feel safe there. You can stay with me as long as you need. That's not a long-term solution. You have your life, your daughter. I can't keep disrupting that. Emma already thinks you're pretty cool, actually. Last weekend she asked when Daddy's friend with the smart job was coming back. That got a small, surprised smile out of Victoria. She said that? 5-year-olds are excellent judges of character. Ryan hesitated, then said what he'd been thinking for days. Look, I know this started as a temporary thing, emergency housing until the restraining order hearing, but things have changed, and honestly, I don't want you to move out. Not because I think you can't take care of yourself, but because I like having you around. Even with all the chaos and fear and legal drama, I like coming home to someone who gets my obscure tech references and doesn't judge me for eating cereal for dinner. Victoria's eyes were wet. Ryan, I'm not asking for anything to change between us. I'm just saying you don't have to rush to find another place. My couch is surprisingly comfortable, and I've gotten used to having someone to watch terrible reality TV with at 2 a.m. when neither of us can sleep. I don't watch reality TV. You watched 3 episodes of that baking show last week. That's different. That's educational. Sure it is. They sat there, the tension breaking slightly, and Ryan realized this was what had been building between them for weeks. Not romance exactly, but partnership. The kind of connection forged in crisis and sustained by genuine care. His phone buzzed. Reeves. Marcus Chen in custody. Search warrant executed. Found purchase receipts for cameras in his home office. Also found detailed logs of Victoria's movements, schedules, routine, looking at serious stalking charges. Ryan showed Victoria the text. She read it twice, then set the phone down carefully. "It's really happening," she said. "He's actually going to face real consequences." "Yeah, he is." "I don't feel relieved. I thought I'd feel relieved, but I just feel—" She stopped, searching for words. "Violated? Used? Angry that it took cameras in my bedroom for anyone to take this seriously. I know. And you're allowed to feel all of that. You're allowed to be angry that the system failed you until the evidence became undeniable." Victoria leaned back against the conference room wall, closing her eyes. "When does it stop hurting?" "I don't know, but eventually, I think. My sister said it took her years to stop looking over her shoulder, to trust that her ex wasn't lurking around every corner. But she got there. And you will too." "I hope you're right." They stayed at the station until Reeves gave them the full update. Marcus had been formally charged with 3 counts of unlawful surveillance, 1 count of burglary, and 1 count of felony stalking. His bail was set high enough that he wouldn't be getting out anytime soon. The evidence was solid, the case straightforward. For once, the system was working the way it was supposed to. "What happens now?" Victoria asked. "Now we build the prosecution case," Reeves said. "You'll need to give testimony, probably multiple times. There'll be a preliminary hearing, then a trial if Marcus doesn't take a plea deal. It's going to be a long process, but we have him, really have him this time." Victoria nodded, but Ryan could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. This was supposed to be the victory, the moment when everything got better. Instead, it just felt like the beginning of another long fight. They drove home in silence. When they got back to Ryan's apartment, Victoria went straight to the bedroom without a word. Ryan heard the door close, then lock, then nothing. He wanted to check on her, to make sure she was okay, but he recognized the need for space, for privacy that was actually private this time. So he settled on the couch with his laptop and started researching trauma therapists who specialized in stalking victims, making a list for Victoria when she was ready. Around midnight, the bedroom door opened. Victoria emerged wearing Ryan's old Timbers t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair down, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Every time I close my eyes, I think about those cameras, about him watching me, cataloging my life, planning his next move." She moved to the couch and sat down beside him, closer than usual. "I keep wondering what else I missed, what other invasions I didn't catch. Reeves said they swept your apartment thoroughly. Those were the only cameras that we found. But what about my car? My office? What if there are more?" "Then we'll find them. We'll sweep everything, check every corner. But Victoria, you can't live your whole life assuming you're being watched." "Why not? That's been my reality for 7 months." Ryan didn't have a good answer to that. She was right. Her paranoia was justified, earned through experience. Telling her to relax felt like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off. "What do you need right now?" he asked instead. Victoria thought about it, then said something that surprised him. "I need you to tell me about something normal, something that has nothing to do with Marcus or restraining orders or surveillance. Tell me about Emma, or your work, or what you wanted to be when you were a kid. Anything." So Ryan told her about his childhood dream of being a marine biologist, about how he'd planned to study whales and save the oceans until he realized marine biology involved a lot of chemistry and math that he was terrible at. He told her about the time Emma had decided she wanted to be a dinosaur when she grew up, not a paleontologist, but an actual dinosaur, and how he and Jenna had spent weeks gently trying to explain why that wasn't possible. He told her about his sister's wedding, about dancing with his niece and realizing he'd blinked, and suddenly the terrified girl he'd tried to protect all those years ago was happy and whole and building a life. Victoria listened, asking questions, laughing at the right parts. And slowly, Ryan watched some of the tension leave her shoulders, saw her breathing deepen and even out. "Thank you," she said when he'd run out of stories. "I needed that." "Anytime." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Victoria said, "I talked to my mom earlier, after we found the cameras. I told her everything, the surveillance, the arrest, all of it. I thought maybe this time, with actual criminal charges, she'd finally believe me." "Did she?" "She apologized for not listening sooner, said she should have trusted me, that she'd let Marcus manipulate her, and she was sorry." Victoria's voice was flat. "It should have felt good to hear that, but it just made me angry. Because what does it say about me, about our relationship, that she needed proof of crimes before she'd believe her own daughter. It says she's human and imperfect, and Marcus is very good at manipulation. It says she didn't trust me, and I don't know how to rebuild that trust. Ryan understood that pain, the betrayal of people who should have believed you but didn't, who needed evidence and documentation before your word was good enough. He'd felt it with his father, with people who dismissed his sister's experiences as drama until the proof became undeniable. You don't have to rebuild it, he said. Not right away. Maybe not ever, if that's what you need. Trust is earned, and your mom broke yours. She'll have to work to get it back. That sounds harsh. It's honest, and sometimes honesty is harsh. Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that felt significant in its casual intimacy. How did you get so wise about complicated family dynamics? Therapy and expensive mistakes. She laughed, and it sounded more genuine than anything he'd heard from her in days. They stayed like that for a while, Victoria's head on his shoulder, Ryan's arm eventually finding its way around her back in a gesture that was comfort more than anything else. I'm scared, Victoria said quietly. Even with Marcus in jail, even with all the evidence and charges. I'm scared this isn't over, that he'll find a way to keep hurting me even from behind bars. He might try, but he'll have a lot less power from a jail cell than he does on the outside. Promise? I promise that I'll be here, however this plays out, that you won't have to face it alone. Victoria tilted her head to look up at him. Why? Why do you keep showing up for me when I'm literally the most complicated person you could have possibly invited into your life? Ryan thought about all the answers he could give. The ones about his sister, about wanting to be useful, about not being able to walk away from someone who needed help. But what came out was simpler and more honest than any of that. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger I was helping and started being someone I care about. And I don't know how to not show up for people I care about, even when it's complicated, especially when it's complicated. Victoria's eyes searched his face, looking for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she settled back against him with a small, tired smile. Okay, she said, then I'll try to stop questioning it and just be grateful. That works. They stayed on the couch until Victoria fell asleep, her breathing deep and even against Ryan's chest. He should have woken her, suggested she move to the bed, but she looked peaceful for the first time in weeks, and he didn't want to disturb that. So he stayed there, arm going numb, neck at an awkward angle, watching over her while she slept. And for the first time since that rainy midnight when she'd knocked on his door asking for sugar, Ryan let himself believe that maybe, eventually, they'd both be okay. Not perfect, not unmarked by everything that had happened, but okay. And right now, that felt like enough. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out, which meant 6 weeks of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Marcus was being held without bail after the judge deemed him a flight risk and a continued threat. But Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, even from jail, he'd find a way to reach her. She was right. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded through Marcus's lawyer in a transparent attempt to circumvent the no-contact order. It was 3 pages long, handwritten, and started with, Dear Victoria, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Victoria read the first paragraph, then threw it across Ryan's living room. He's apologizing, she said, her voice shaking with fury. 3 pages of how sorry he is, how he knows he made mistakes, how he just wants me to be happy. Like installing cameras in my bedroom was some kind of relationship misunderstanding instead of a felony. Ryan picked up the letter, skimmed it, and immediately called Officer Reeves. The letter was added to evidence, another violation, another charge, but it didn't stop the next one from coming, or the one after that. By the 4th letter, Victoria stopped reading them. She just handed them to Reeves unopened, adding them to the growing pile of Marcus's attempts to rewrite history. He's trying to get in your head, Reeves explained, making himself seem reasonable and remorseful so that when this goes to trial, he can point to these letters and say he was trying to make amends. It's a strategy. It's working, Victoria admitted. Not the way he wants, but it's working. Every time one shows up, I spend the whole day waiting for the next one. He's still controlling my time and attention, just from a jail cell instead of a car outside my building. Ryan had noticed the toll it was taking. Victoria had good days now, days where she laughed at Emma's dinosaur facts and actually relaxed during dinner, but the letters always pulled her back into that state of hypervigilance. She'd check the mail obsessively, flinch at unexpected knocks, stay up late reading and rereading court documents like they were scripture. "You need to talk to someone," Ryan said one night after Victoria had spent 3 hours organizing and reorganizing her evidence binders. "A therapist, someone who specializes in this." "I don't have time for therapy. The preliminary hearing is in 2 weeks, and I need to make sure—" "Victoria, you've checked those binders 6 times today. They're perfect. They were perfect 3 checks ago. You're spiraling." She looked up at him, and for a moment he thought she'd argue. Instead, her shoulders slumped. "I know, I just don't know how to stop." "You stop by asking for help. Let me find you someone, please." Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. "Okay, yeah, find me someone." Ryan called his own former therapist, Dr. Sarah Martinez, explained the situation, and got a referral to someone who worked specifically with stalking victims. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo had availability that Thursday, and Victoria went with the same determination she brought to everything else: prepared, professional, and terrified. She came back from that first session looking wrung out. "How was it?" Ryan asked carefully. "She told me I have PTSD, which I guess I knew on some level, but hearing it said out loud made it real." Victoria sat down heavily on the couch. "She also said my hyper-organization and need for control are coping mechanisms, which is apparently both healthy and unhealthy depending on how far I take it." "That sounds about right." "She wants to see me twice a week until the trial. Work on anxiety management, processing trauma, all that stuff." Victoria looked at him. "This is going to be expensive and time-consuming, and I'm going to be even more of a mess than I already am." "Okay. That's it? Just okay?" "What else would I say? You're doing the work. That's what matters." Something in Victoria's expression softened. "Most people would be tired of me by now, of all this drama and chaos I've brought into their lives. Most people aren't me." "Lucky you." "Lucky me," Ryan agreed and meant it. Emma came to visit that weekend, and Ryan had been nervous about how she'd react to Victoria's more permanent presence. He'd explained in 5-year-old terms that his friend Victoria was staying with them for a while because she needed a safe place, and Emma had accepted this with the easy adaptability of children. What Ryan hadn't expected was for Victoria and Emma to bond over dinosaurs. It started when Emma proudly showed Victoria her extensive collection of plastic dinosaurs, each with a name and detailed backstory. Victoria, who'd been having a particularly bad day after another letter from Marcus, sat down on the floor and listened to every word of Emma's 20-minute explanation of why pterodactyls weren't technically dinosaurs. "That's really interesting," Victoria said seriously. "I didn't know that." "Most people don't," Emma said with the world weariness of someone who'd been explaining this distinction her whole life. "But it's important to be accurate. It absolutely is." By the end of the weekend, Victoria had been fully integrated into Emma's world. They built elaborate dinosaur habitats out of couch cushions, watched documentaries about the Cretaceous period, and had lengthy debates about whether T-Rex arms were actually useless or just misunderstood. Ryan watched them from the kitchen while making dinner, something warm settling in his chest. This, Victoria cross-legged on the floor, Emma chattering away, both of them completely absorbed in their dinosaur world, felt right in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "Daddy, can Victoria come to my kindergarten graduation next month?" Emma asked at dinner. Ryan glanced at Victoria, who looked surprised and touched. "That's up to Victoria, sweetie. She might be busy with work." "I'd love to come," Victoria said. "If that's okay with you and your mom." "Mommy will like you," Emma said confidently. "She likes everyone who likes dinosaurs." After Emma went to bed, Victoria helped Ryan clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, a routine they'd developed over the past 2 months. When the last dish was dried and put away, Victoria turned to him. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me be part of this, part of your life with Emma. It means more than you know. You're part of the family now, whether you planned on it or not." Victoria's eyes were bright. "I never had a family that felt like this. My parents split when I was young. My sister and I were never close. My mom was always more focused on her business than on us. Being here, watching you with Emma, seeing what actual care looks like, it's teaching me things I didn't know I needed to learn." Ryan set down the dish towel. "Like what?" "Like how showing up consistently matters more than grand gestures. Like how asking for help is strength, not weakness. Like how love isn't about control or possession. It's about wanting someone to be okay, even when it's inconvenient for you. She paused. You've been inconvenienced a lot because of me. I've been a lot of things because of you. Inconvenienced isn't one of them. What would you call it then? Ryan thought about it. Changed. In good ways, mostly. You've made me think about what I want my life to look like, what kind of person I want to be. Not just for Emma, but for myself. And what kind of person is that? Someone who doesn't wait for permission to do the right thing. Someone who shows up even when it's complicated. Someone Emma can be proud of. He met Victoria's eyes. Someone you can be proud of. Victoria stepped closer, and for a moment Ryan thought she might kiss him. Instead, she rested her forehead against his shoulder and he wrapped his arms around her in a hug that felt like coming home. I'm already proud of you, she said quietly. You know that, right? I'm learning. They stood like that for a while, holding each other in Ryan's small kitchen, both of them aware that something was shifting between them, but neither quite ready to name it. The preliminary hearing arrived with the weight of inevitability. Victoria wore her navy suit again, the armor that made her feel competent, even when she felt like she was falling apart. Ryan took the day off work and sat beside her in the courtroom, a steady presence she'd come to depend on. Marcus was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking thinner than he had at the violation hearing. His lawyer was the same aggressive woman from before, and she immediately went on the offensive. Your Honor, the surveillance equipment was installed with Ms. Hale's full knowledge and consent when they were in a relationship. My client simply forgot to remove it when they separated. The burglary charge is baseless. He used a key he'd legitimately been given. And as for the stalking charges, Mr. Chen's actions were those of a concerned former partner, not a criminal. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Watts, didn't even blink. Your Honor, the cameras in question weren't manufactured until 6 months after Ms. Hale and Mr. Chen ended their relationship. They were installed 3 weeks ago while Ms. Hale was out of town, using a key Mr. Chen obtained illegally. Ms. Hale changed her lock 7 months ago and never provided him with new keys. We have purchase records, installation footage, and logs proving Mr. Chen was actively surveilling Ms. Hale without her knowledge or consent. This isn't a case of forgotten equipment. This is premeditated stalking. The judge reviewed the evidence, his expression growing darker. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. Mr. Chen, I've read the entire case file. The camera installation, the hundreds of emails, the violation of the restraining order, the contact with Ms. Hale's family and employer, the attempt to access a minor child through deception. This is one of the clearest cases of stalking I've seen in my 20 years on the bench. Marcus's lawyer tried to interrupt. Your Honor, I'm not finished. Mr. Chen, you've shown a pattern of escalating behavior, a complete disregard for court orders, and a level of obsession that frankly concerns me. I'm ordering you to stand trial on all charges. Additionally, I'm denying bail. You'll remain in custody until trial. For the first time, Marcus's mask cracked. Your Honor, that's not fair. I have a business, obligations. You should have thought about that before you installed cameras in your ex-girlfriend's bedroom. We're done here. Outside the courtroom, Victoria finally allowed herself to breathe. He's going to trial, she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. And he's staying in jail until then. You did it, Ryan said. You stood up to him and won. We did it. I couldn't have survived this without you. Officer Reeves approached them, a rare smile on her face. The trial's scheduled for 8 weeks out. DA's office is confident about conviction. The evidence is overwhelming. You should start thinking about victim impact statements. Victoria nodded, but Ryan could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. This wasn't over yet. There was still a trial to get through, still weeks of waiting and preparing. But for the first time, the end was actually visible. The 8 weeks between the preliminary hearing and the trial were strange. Marcus was in jail, unable to contact Victoria directly, but his presence still loomed over everything. His lawyer filed motion after motion, trying to get evidence suppressed or charges dismissed. Each one failed, but each one required Victoria to relive the trauma, to provide additional testimony, to prove over and over that yes, this really happened, and yes, it was really that bad. Victoria threw herself into therapy with Dr. Okonkwo, showing up twice a week and doing the hard work of processing 7 months of terror. She had bad days where she couldn't get out of bed, Good days where she laughed freely, and a lot of in-between days where she was just trying to survive. Ryan watched her slowly start to heal, saw the hypervigilance ease incrementally, noticed the way she stopped checking the mail quite so obsessively. But he also saw the cost. The nightmares that woke her at 3 a.m., the panic attacks triggered by unexpected noises, the way she still sometimes looked at him like she couldn't quite believe he was still there. "I'm sorry I'm so broken," she said one night after a particularly bad nightmare. "You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. Feels the same from where I'm sitting." "I know, but it's not." One night, about a month before the trial, Victoria came home from therapy and announced she'd made a decision. "I'm starting over," she said. "New apartment, new office location, new routines. I can't keep living in fear that Marcus somehow infected every part of my old life. I need spaces that are mine, that he never touched." "That makes sense. I found a place in the Pearl District. 2-bedroom, good security, completely different area from where I was. I'm signing the lease tomorrow." Ryan felt something sink in his chest, even though he knew this was coming, knew it was healthy for Victoria to rebuild her independence. "That's great, really great." "The second bedroom is an office," Victoria continued, watching his face. "But if things work out the way I hope they will, eventually it could be something else. Guest room for when Emma visits, maybe, if you want." Ryan looked up sharply. "If I want? I'm not moving out to get away from you, Ryan. I'm moving out because I need my own space, my own life that isn't defined by trauma and crisis management. But I'm hoping—" She stopped, took a breath. "I'm hoping we can figure out what this is between us when I'm not sleeping on your couch out of necessity." "What do you think it is?" "I don't know, but I'd like to find out. If you're willing to be patient with me while I figure out how to be a person again." Ryan crossed the room and took her hands. "I've been patient this long. I can keep going. It might take a while. I'm still a mess. We're all messes. Some of us just hide it better than others." Victoria laughed, and it sounded lighter than it had in weeks. "When did you get so wise?" "I've been faking it and hoping you wouldn't notice." She kissed him then, soft and tentative, a question more than a statement. Ryan kissed her back, gentle and unhurried, letting her set the pace. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. "Okay," she said. "Let's see where this goes." The trial started on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. The courtroom was packed, journalists covering the case, court watchers, some of Victoria's employees who'd come to support her. Marcus sat at the defense table in a suit his lawyer had clearly provided, looking more like the successful businessman he'd been than the stalker he'd become. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The emails, the camera footage, the restraining order violations, the attempt to access Emma through her school. They brought in expert witnesses on stalking behavior, technicians who'd examined the surveillance equipment, Officer Reeves to testify about the pattern of escalation. Marcus's defense was predictable. He claimed the relationship had been mutually obsessive, that Victoria had encouraged his attention until she suddenly turned on him, that he was the real victim of her vindictive behavior. His lawyer painted a picture of a successful man destroyed by a powerful woman who couldn't handle rejection. It might have worked if the evidence hadn't been so overwhelming. Victoria's testimony was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. She spent 4 hours on the stand, walking through the timeline of Marcus's harassment with the same precision she'd used in every other aspect of this case. She didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't perform her trauma for the jury. She just told the truth, clearly and completely, and let the facts speak for themselves. When Marcus's lawyer cross-examined her, trying to trip her up or make her seem unstable, Victoria remained calm. "Ms. Hale, isn't it true that you initiated contact with my client on several occasions after the breakup?" "No, I responded to some of his early emails before I understood what he was doing. That's different from initiating contact." "But you did respond. You engaged with him." "I tried to be professional about ending a business relationship. That doesn't constitute encouragement or consent for 7 months of harassment. You claim to have been afraid of my client, yet you never went to the police until months after the alleged stalking began. Why is that?" Victoria met the lawyer's eyes steadily. "Because I knew what would happen. Exactly what's happening now. I'd be questioned about why I didn't report sooner, why I didn't just ignore him, why I didn't handle it better. Women who report stalking are rarely believed until something violent happens. I was trying to avoid becoming a statistic. The jury's faces showed they understood what she meant. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Victoria sat perfectly still when the verdict was read, like she was afraid any movement might shatter the moment. Only when the judge thanked the jury and dismissed them did she finally turn to Ryan, her eyes wet. "It's over," she whispered. "Yeah, it's over." Marcus was sentenced 2 weeks later. 5 years for the stalking charges, 2 years for burglary, 18 months for the surveillance violations, all to run consecutively. 7.5 years total, with credit for time served. He'd be eligible for parole in 5, but with his conviction record and the nature of his crimes, parole seemed unlikely. Victoria sat through the sentencing hearing with the same composure she'd maintained throughout the trial. But when the judge asked if she wanted to deliver a victim impact statement, she stood. "For 7 months," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Marcus Chen controlled my life through fear. He made me question my own judgment, doubt my own perceptions, and feel unsafe in my own home. He turned my family against me, tried to destroy my professional reputation, and violated my privacy in the most intimate ways possible. But he didn't break me. I'm standing here today not as his victim, but as someone who survived him and came out stronger on the other side. I hope he uses his time in prison to understand the harm he caused. But whether he does or not, I'm done letting him take up space in my life. I'm moving forward, and he can't follow me anymore." She sat down to absolute silence. Then the judge nodded, thanked her for her statement, and passed sentence. Outside the courthouse, Victoria was swarmed by reporters. Ryan watched her handle them with grace, answering questions about her ordeal and her company's work without making the story bigger than it needed to be. She was good at this, he realized, taking control of the narrative, refusing to be defined by what had happened to her. When they finally made it back to Ryan's car, Victoria's composure finally cracked. She cried, not the careful, controlled tears she'd allowed herself throughout this process, but deep, racking sobs that shook her whole body. Ryan held her in the parking garage while she let it all out, 7 months of fear and rage and grief pouring out in waves. "I'm sorry," she said eventually, pulling back and wiping her face. "I'm getting your shirt all gross. I have other shirts. I thought I'd feel triumphant, or at least relieved, but I just feel empty. Like I spent so much energy surviving that now that it's over, I don't know what to do with myself." You do what comes next. You live your life, you build your business, and move into your new apartment and figure out who you are when you're not in survival mode. What if I don't like who that person is? Then you'll figure that out too. But Victoria, I've seen who you are when you're not fighting for your life. You're smart and funny and kind, and you care about people even when it costs you something. That's not going to change just because the crisis is over. Victoria rested her head against his shoulder. I want to believe that. So believe it. You've done harder things than believing in yourself. They sat in the parking garage until Victoria's breathing evened out, and she felt steady enough to drive. On the way home, she was quiet, processing. Ryan let her be, understanding that some things needed silence more than words. When they got back to his apartment, Emma was there with Jenna, who'd agreed to bring her early so Victoria wouldn't come home to an empty place after the sentencing. "Did the bad man go to jail?" Emma asked immediately. "Yeah, sweetie," Victoria said, crouching down to Emma's level. "He did. For a long time." "Good. He was mean to you." "He was, but it's over now." Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck in a fierce hug. "I'm glad you're safe." Victoria's eyes filled again, but she was smiling when she pulled back. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." Jenna pulled Ryan aside while Victoria and Emma started building a dinosaur habitat on the living room floor. "She's good for you," Jenna said quietly. "I know I was skeptical at first, but I was wrong. She's really good for you." "Yeah, she is." "Are you two?" Jenna gestured vaguely. "We're figuring it out, taking it slow." "Good. Slow is good, especially after everything she's been through." Jenna squeezed his arm. "I'm proud of you, Ryan, for helping her, for being there even when it got complicated. That's who I always hoped you'd be." "I had good motivation." "You did, but you still showed up. That matters." After Jenna left, Ryan made dinner while Victoria and Emma colored pictures of dinosaurs. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that Ryan had to pause and just take it in. This was his life now, not perfect, still complicated in places, but good. Really good. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed and Victoria was packing up her things to head back to the bedroom, she stopped and turned to Ryan. "I move into the new place this weekend," she said. "If you and Emma want to help, I'd appreciate it. I don't have much, but what I have is heavy. We'll be there. And after I'm settled, maybe we could have dinner, just the two of us. Somewhere nice. Like a date?" "Yeah, like a date." Victoria smiled. "Is that okay? Or is it too soon?" "It's been months, Victoria. If anything, we're moving slow." "Slow is good. Slow means I get to actually know you without crisis and fear clouding everything." "What if you don't like what you find out?" "I already know you eat cereal for dinner, quote, children's books like they're philosophy, and fall asleep during movies even when you claim you're just resting your eyes. If I can handle that, I can handle whatever else there is." Ryan laughed. "Fair point." Victoria moved into her new apartment that weekend with Ryan and Emma's help. It was a bright space on the 12th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. She'd furnished it minimally, just the essentials, leaving room to add things as she figured out what she wanted. "It's perfect," Emma declared, running from room to room. "Can I have sleepovers here?" "Absolutely," Victoria said. "We'll have to coordinate with your dad and mom, but yes, anytime you want." "Even on school nights?" "Probably not school nights." Emma considered this. "That's fair." They spent the day unpacking boxes, assembling furniture, and ordering too much pizza. By evening, the apartment looked lived in the best way. A little messy, a lot warm, full of potential. After Emma and Ryan left, Victoria stood in her living room alone for the first time in months. The silence was profound, but it wasn't scary. It was just silence, neutral, peaceful, hers. She pulled out her phone and texted her sister. "Marcus was sentenced to 7.5 years today. I know you don't believe me about what happened, and I don't know if you ever will, but I wanted you to know it's over. The door is open if you ever want to talk." She didn't expect a response, but 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. Can we talk?" Victoria stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "Yes, but not tonight. Soon. I need some time. Take all the time you need. I love you. I love you too." Victoria set the phone down and walked to the windows, looking out at Portland spread below her. Somewhere in this city, Marcus was in a cell, and she was here, free. The reversal felt surreal, like something she'd imagined so many times it couldn't possibly be real. But it was real. She'd survived. And now she got to figure out what came next. The dinner date happened 2 weeks later at a small Italian place in the Pearl District. Ryan showed up in actual dress pants and a button-down shirt, which made Victoria laugh. "You clean up nice," she said. "I have my moments." They ordered wine and pasta and talked about everything except Marcus and stalking and court cases. They talked about Victoria's plans to expand her company, about Ryan's half-serious idea to go back to school for marine biology, about Emma's latest dinosaur obsession, and whether pterodactyls would have made good pets. "This is nice," Victoria said eventually. "Just being normal people, having a normal conversation." "We were never really normal," Ryan pointed out. "Our first conversation involved you lying about needing sugar." "True. But we can be normal now. Or at least try." "I'm okay with trying." They lingered over dessert, neither wanting the evening to end. When Ryan walked Victoria back to her apartment building, she invited him up for coffee. "I make terrible coffee," she warned. "Not nearly as good as yours." "I'll survive." In her apartment, Victoria made coffee that was, as promised, terrible. They drank it anyway, sitting on her couch and talking until the conversation ran out, and all that was left was the comfortable silence of two people who'd been through hell together and made it out the other side. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said eventually. "Always." "Do you think we would have met under different circumstances? If I hadn't knocked on your door that night, would we have ever talked?" Ryan thought about it. "Honestly, probably not. I'm not great at meeting new people, and you've been pretty clear about being focused on work to the exclusion of everything else. We might have passed each other in the hallway for years without ever saying more than hello. So in a weird way, Marcus brought us together. I'd rather give credit to your bravery in asking for help and my inability to mind my own business." Victoria smiled. "I like that version better." "Me too." She leaned in and kissed him, and this time it felt different from that tentative first kiss. This was a choice made from peace rather than crisis. a deliberate step forward instead of a desperate grab for comfort. When they pulled apart, Ryan said what he'd been thinking for weeks. I love you. I know it's fast and probably too soon and we're still figuring out what this is, but I love you. And I wanted you to know that. Victoria's eyes were bright. It's not too soon. And I love you too, which terrifies me, honestly, because the last time I loved someone, it went very badly. But I trust you, Ryan, and that's even bigger than love for me right now. I'll take it. Good. Because you're stuck with me now. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. They sat together on Victoria's couch, holding each other, both aware that this wasn't the end of their story, but the beginning of a different chapter. There would still be hard days. Healing wasn't linear, and trust took time to rebuild. But they had time now, all the time in the world. 6 months later, Victoria's company won a major contract with a national nonprofit network. The deal would triple her revenue and require hiring a new COO to manage operations. She interviewed carefully, running background checks and calling references and trusting her instincts in a way she hadn't been able to before. She hired a woman named Sarah, who was brilliant and ambitious, and had absolutely no interest in blurring professional and personal boundaries. It was perfect. Emma's kindergarten graduation was everything a kindergarten graduation should be: chaotic, adorable, and way too long. Victoria sat between Ryan and Jenna, watching Emma receive her certificate with the same serious expression she brought to explaining dinosaur taxonomy. She's amazing, Victoria whispered to Ryan. She gets it from her mother. And her father? After the ceremony, Emma ran over to them, certificate clutched in her hand. Did you see me? I didn't trip on the stage. We saw, Victoria said. You were perfect. Not perfect, my socks didn't match. But nobody noticed. The mark of a true professional, Ryan said gravely. They celebrated with ice cream, Emma chattering about first grade and whether she'd be allowed to bring dinosaur books to show and tell. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions and making Emma feel heard in that way she'd gotten so good at. Later, after they dropped Emma back with Jenna, Victoria and Ryan walked through the park near his apartment. The Portland summer evening was perfect, warm but not too hot, golden light filtering through the trees. I've been thinking, Victoria said, about moving in together. For real, not just because of a crisis. Ryan stopped walking. Yeah? My lease is up in 4 months. Your place is too small for 3 people, and mine doesn't make sense if we're trying to blend our lives. So I was thinking we could find something together. Big enough for Emma to have her own room when she's with us, with an office for me and space for whatever hobbies you decide to take up. I don't have hobbies. Exactly. You should work on that. Victoria smiled. What do you think? I think it's the best idea you've had since knocking on my door asking for sugar. So that's a yes. That's absolutely a yes. They kissed in the middle of the path, not caring who saw, both of them grinning like idiots when they pulled apart. That night, lying in bed in Victoria's apartment, she said something that had been building for months. I used to think surviving meant just getting through each day without falling apart. But you taught me it means something different. It means building a life worth living, not just existing in the absence of threat. You taught me that healing looks like terrible coffee in the middle of the night, and 5-year-olds explaining dinosaurs, and someone who shows up even when it's inconvenient. You taught me what love actually looks like, and it's nothing like what I thought it was. Ryan pulled her closer. You taught me a few things too, like how being needed isn't the same as being useful, and how the bravest thing you can do is ask for help when you need it, and how sometimes the best thing you can offer someone isn't solutions, but just being there while they figure it out themselves. We're a mess, aren't we? Yeah, but we're a mess together, which is different. Better? Definitely better. In the morning, they started apartment hunting. In the afternoon, Victoria had a therapy session where she talked about moving forward instead of just moving on. In the evening, they picked Emma up from school and went to the dinosaur exhibit at the Natural History Museum, all 3 of them learning about prehistoric creatures and eating overpriced museum cafe food. It was ordinary. It was perfect. It was the life Victoria had stopped believing she could have, built one ordinary day at a time with someone who'd shown up at exactly the right moment and never left. Sometimes she still thought about that rainy night when she'd knocked on Ryan's door with a ceramic bowl and a desperate story about needing sugar. How terrified she'd been, how close to breaking. How she'd chosen his door over all the others in the building based on nothing more than a memory of him searching for his daughter's stuffed rabbit. The smallest moments she'd learned could change everything. A knock on a door, a decision to help instead of turning away. A choice to trust someone when trust felt impossible. Marcus had spent 7 months trying to destroy her, and in some ways he'd succeeded. The Victoria who'd knocked on Ryan's door wasn't the same person who stood here now. But she'd been rebuilt into something stronger, something that couldn't be shaken by fear or manipulated by control. She'd survived, and more than that, she'd learned what it meant to thrive. A year after the sentencing, Victoria got a letter from Marcus's parole board requesting a victim statement. He was applying for early release based on good behavior, and they wanted her input. Victoria wrote a single paragraph. Marcus Chen is a dangerous man who violated my privacy, my safety, and my autonomy for 7 months. He showed no remorse until his actions resulted in criminal charges, and even then, his apologies were self-serving attempts to manipulate the legal process. I do not believe he has been rehabilitated, and I strongly oppose his early release. He should serve his full sentence. She sent the letter and didn't think about it again. Marcus didn't get parole. 2 years after that, Victoria and Ryan got married in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Portland. Emma was the flower girl, taking her duties so seriously she counted each petal she dropped to ensure even distribution. Victoria's sister was there, their relationship still imperfect but healing. Ryan's sister gave a speech about how sometimes the people who save us are the ones who let us save ourselves. It was simple and beautiful, and everything Victoria had never let herself dream about during those months when just surviving felt like enough. On their wedding night, Ryan said, "You know what I think about sometimes?" "What?" "How different everything would be if you'd knocked on literally any other door that night. 2B or 3A, or if you'd just gotten in your car and driven to a hotel. We might never have met, never had any of this." Victoria considered that. "I think about it too. But then I remember that I didn't knock on any other door. I chose yours. And maybe that was random, or maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was just dumb luck, but it was the best decision I've ever made. Better than starting your company? Better than anything. Because all the professional success in the world doesn't mean much when you're too afraid to live your life. You gave me my life back, Ryan. You and Emma both. You showed me what safety feels like, what trust looks like, what love looks like when it's real and not dressed up as control." Ryan kissed her forehead. "You gave me a lot too, you know. Purpose and bravery, and someone who actually laughs at my terrible jokes. Your jokes are not terrible. They're objectively terrible. You're just biased. I earned the right to be biased. I married you." They laughed together in their hotel room, two people who'd found each other in the middle of a crisis and chosen to stay together long after the crisis ended. It wasn't the romance of movies or fairy tales. It was better. It was real. Years later, Emma would ask about how her dad and Victoria met, and they'd tell her the truth. It started with a lie about sugar and a knock on a door at midnight, and it turned into something neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. They'd tell her that sometimes people come into your life at exactly the moment you need them most, and the bravest thing you can do is let them in. That asking for help isn't weakness, but wisdom. That survival isn't about being strong enough to do everything alone. It's about being smart enough to know when you need someone else. They'd tell her that fear is real, and trauma is real, and healing is hard work that never quite finishes. But they'd also tell her that on the other side of fear is a life worth living, built on trust and honesty, and showing up for the people you love even when it's inconvenient. And they'd tell her that love, real love, the kind that lasts, isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about someone who makes you coffee at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep and holds you when you're falling apart and believes you when everyone else doubts. It's about building something together, brick by brick, day by day, until you look around and realize you've created a home. That's what Victoria and Ryan built. Not perfectly, not without mistakes or hard days or moments when they both wondered if they were doing it right, but together, always together, with the kind of partnership that can only be forged in fire and proven in peace. It started with a knock on a door. It ended with a life neither of them had dared to imagine. And in between was all the messy, complicated, beautiful work of becoming the people they needed to be, not just for each other, but for themselves. Because that's what real healing looks like. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of strength. not forgetting what happened, but refusing to let it define what comes next. Victoria had walked through fire and come out the other side, not unmarked, but unbroken. And she'd learned the most important truth of all. You don't have to face the fire alone. Sometimes, all it takes is the courage to knock on the right door and the grace to accept the hand that reaches back. The rest is just showing up, day after day, building a life one choice at a time. And that ultimately was enough. More than enough. It was everything.